morning. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Yuma County Board of Supervisors. There is an executive session. I guess that's why it got taken up a little bit, but there will be an executive session a little later. We're also sitting as all special taxing districts. This is the February the 4th, 2019 meeting. Board members can attend either in person or by telephone. I guess everybody's here. We asked Supervisor McLeod to be here for his item. We're going to move the executive session till the end so we can have some continuity here. So we will take the first item, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. Will everybody please stand up and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Supervisor McLeod, please lead us in the pledge.
Sure. Please join me. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Well, the first item in the agenda, it's call to the public. Call to the public is held for the public's benefit to allow individuals to address issues within the board's jurisdiction. Board members may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to Arizona revised statutes, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to criticism, or scheduling the matter for further discussion in a decision at a future date. I do have a lot of signing sheets. I think most of them are for something specifically in the agenda. Is there anyone here that wants to address the board on an item that isn't in the agenda? Would you please step up to the podium, please? Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Reyes. Good morning, supervisors and citizens of Yuma County. My name is Anthony Fogelman. I'm currently in a discovery phase. I advocate the use of solar power to cities, counties, schools, airports, commercial, and government energy users. I work to rapidly demystify the basics of energy by putting projects into simple financial terms, helping to speed the process of deployment. My success means that taxpayers will save money and future generations will enjoy a cleaner environment. According to the Solar Power Energy Industry Association, the cost to install solar in the USA dropped 70% since 2010. It was in 2015 that the cost to manufacture a watt of solar power dropped below $1. It was this threshold that economists had for years predicted was required for solar power to go mainstream. I'm pleased to admit that it is now mainstream. However, that doesn't necessarily solve the problems of Yuma County. As a consultant, I assist with helping to qualify projects and move through the various stages, including preliminary designs, financing, engineering, procurement, and construction. One needn't use long-range vision to see the benefits of solar power any longer. It is a clear winner by any method of measurement. In Arizona, the movement to go solar is gaining traction, where the average payback period is about 10 years. Another way to say that is that it takes 10 years of electric bills to purchase a system that will supply energy for 40 years. This represents a 4-time return on your investment, thus making clear economic sense. Using our method, you can save immediately with no out-of-pocket by virtue of a PPA or power purchase agreement, the typical financial method for large projects of this type. Perhaps you've heard the news. It's cheaper now to make energy from the sun than with coal or other dirty fuels, even without considering the unintentional, yet no less terrible environmental consequences of the latter. I believe it's good news for the people of Yuma. Should you embrace solar PV, taxpayers actually get paid to contribute to a healthy environment. We make it easy for cities to go solar and counties. We design and manage development of large-scale solar projects for qualifying entities that wish to save on electricity, all with no money out of pocket. Our investors assume all the risks of these large-scale projects and make systems available for purchase after 10 years. Projects are put out to bid by national EPCs to get the best deal possible. That's in engineering, procurement, and construction companies. Depending upon the number and the size of the projects combined, the county would receive 10% or more savings on electricity. After 10 years, the depreciated system is made available at fair market value, saving taxpayers upwards of 90% or more on energy. Basically, I'm suggesting that assuming sufficient energy usage, and other factors, Yuma County taxpayers could expect to save 10% or more on energy. I guess that means my time is up.
Finish up. If you
Okay,
have, you know, a
I'm
couple
almost
of
done.
seconds.
Unless the board is utterly disinterested and discourages me, then I wish to proceed with a request for documentation that will permit us to analyze the energy usage of the county and propose the next steps, at which point I could return to the council better informed.
All right, I think that we do have a process that you go through, and I think you ought to, you know, we're gonna direct you to the county administrator and you take it
Wonderful.
from there, okay?
Perfect.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you
Right
so
there.
much.
She's right there. Susan.
There's your county administrator right there, so you have a face. Okay.
All right. Anyone else that wants to address the board in an item that isn't in the agenda? I do have plenty of.
Come on up.
Yes, BC Colonia must be here.
I gotta play beat the clock again. Okay, good morning. My name is Gail Castrocone. My address is 12396 40th Street. I am here again on behalf of the Colonia BNC. Our original steering committee was formed in July of 2004. Since that time, we have had neighborhood cleanups and we established the improvement district, and our much needed city sewer was put in. After the sewer project was completed, all other projects went down into the toilet, so to speak. You're supposed to laugh at that.
I did.
Inside, we left inside.
I retired in 2010 and moved to Prescott. Our daughter and grandchildren stayed in our family home on 5th Street. I moved to the foothills for the winter months, but every time I go to visit my family on 5th Street, I am heartbroken to see the slum and blight remains. Abandoned vehicles and trailers remain on the properties for months. Graffiti is evident everywhere, and crime is so high that 3 people were murdered just blocks from my family home. So now I've decided to be proactive in the community once again. My husband and I are selling our foothills home and moving back to our family home in what we lovingly call the Hood on 5th Street. And the acronym for that is Helping Overcome Obstacles Daily. I already started to form a new steering committee. I am implementing the Butterfly Project in honor of my dear son, Kenny, and that's why I'm wearing my butterflies. The projects will revitalize and improve the quality of life for the residents. Our first projects will be a training on how to be proactive in the community, block watch, graffiti abatement, adopt a wall campaign, fire prevention, which we were already setting up for October with Kat Headington, tender care, animal control, and property cleanups. I am looking forward to meeting and working with the Department of Development Services. I leave you with a quote from the Bible, Matthew 22:37. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And Matthew 22:39. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. God bless you and have a happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Thank you for the chocolate.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I have more.
All right. Anyone else? If not, then we'll move to the next item in the agenda, which is the presentations, proclamations, and appointments section. During this segment of the agenda, board members may discuss the presentations and proclamations, may announce appointments to the Yuma County Planning and Zoning Commission and the Yuma County Board of Adjustment. There will be no legal action. So, any members, any appointments? No? Then we'll move on then to the next item in the agenda, which is the presentation of the county line by Yuma 77, the Yuma County Government Channel.
Some court cases in the area have been resolved online. We have the details. Why were so many would-be wizards gathered at the Foothills Library? We'll tell you. And we take an inside look at the county's Financial Services Department. These stories and more, this is your County Line. if you've ever been involved with the court process, you may be confused on where to go and what to do. Thanks to a new program being tested in Yuma County, that confusion can be relieved because now some disputes can be settled online. The Arizona Administrative Office is piloting an online dispute resolution service in Yuma County. Some cases in the area of family law have been getting resolved using technology to facilitate resolutions in court matters. Some cases, such as modification of decision-making, parenting time, and child support, as well as enforcement of child support, all have the potential to be considered for the online dispute resolution process.
Because you can do this at any time. We can do this online dispute resolution communication with the parents in between our other in-person mediations. So if we've got some downtime, and we do occasionally, then we can communicate.
The online dispute resolution project is also being piloted in different courts around the state. It's all part of the Arizona Administrative Office's commitment to promoting access to justice. It was a Potter-tastic event at the Foothills Library recently as young people gathered for the 5th annual Harry Potter Book Night. The library transformed into the 4 houses of Hogwarts: Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff. Participants had the chance to learn what it takes to be a wizard like Harry Potter. Wands and gift bags were prepared for the first 300 people to arrive, and the young people enjoyed the wizard shops, crafts, trivia, and games.
We're trying to help encourage, foster a love of reading, help them to become better readers, give them a diverse option of things to read, as well as giving them opportunities such as Harry Potter Day, our summer reading program, our winter reading program that we also have going on, to help foster that love of reading.
The Harry Potter Book Night is celebrated each year throughout the world, and tens of thousands would-be wizards attend each year. On this edition of our Department Spotlight series, we take a closer look at the Financial Services Department. They're responsible for all financial programs in Yuma County.
The mission statement for the Financial Services Department pretty much is for us to provide customers with professional and reliable services that they are timely, they're accurate, and of course they're valuable to their operations. Accounts payable, they handle all the payments for the vendors. They not only process the invoices, they print the checks, they mail the checks, and if there is any discrepancy with the payments, they handle that. We do travel for the entire county. Every single purchase that is done in Yuma County, compliance reviews it to make sure that it's part of the purchasing policies. Another division is our financial reporting division, and their main responsibility is to assist the chief financial officer and the deputy financial officer to prepare the financial statements and also to go through the annual audit. General Ledger pretty much is in charge of keeping the integrity of our data. They are the ones that make sure that all the transactions are properly classified, properly coded. So payroll handles paychecks pretty much for all the 1,300 employees here in Yuma County. From withholdings to garnishment, payroll collects all that data, enters the information in the system, and we make sure that everybody gets properly paid. Finance department plays a very important role in Yuma County because we have contact with each agency here in Yuma County. They always have a need for a report. They always have a need for information. They always have a need for guidance and training.
You can learn more about Yuma County's Finance Department by visiting yumacountyaz.gov. You'll find them under the Government tab. Hi, I'm Tricia, and this is your Health Watch. Cigarette smoking and battery-powered devices such as e-cigarettes and Juul continues to be the leading cause of preventable death in the country. Smokers must quit smoking completely to fully protect their health. Here are some helpful tips to get you started. Pick a quit date. Try to pick a date that is only a week or 2 away, and be sure to highlight that day in your planner and inform others of this date if you would like. List your reasons to quit. This list can serve as a reminder to keep you motivated on your journey towards quitting. Get rid of tobacco products and e-cigarettes. You can decide to quit cold turkey or opt to begin with cutting down on the number of cigarettes per day. Identify your triggers. Identify why and when you smoke and begin changing your routine. Learn strategies to fight cravings. Remember the 4 Ds. Do something else, drink water, deep breathing, and delay, as cravings pass after only a few minutes. To learn more about the tools available to help you find and follow a quit strategy that works best for you, please contact the Yuma County Public Health Services District Tobacco Use Prevention Program at 928-317-4580 and get information on our free support classes. You can also call ASH Line, the Arizona Smokers Hotline, at 1-800-556-6222 to get support to help you quit and stay quit. Until next time, stay healthy, Yuma. Before we head out, there are some important events coming up you may want to know about. Yuma County will be holding an online surplus auction from Friday, March 15th to Friday, March 29th. If you're interested, just visit publicsurplus.com on Friday, March 15th, and you'll be able to view and bid on everything listed. Also, the Yuma County Juvenile Justice Center will be holding the 2nd annual Kids at Hope Golf Tournament. Start time on Saturday, May 4th will be 8 a.m. at the Cocopah RV Resort Golf Center. You can find out more and register by contacting Leo Mendez at 316-4964. Finally, as we close this segment, we have some additional information for you regarding a story from last episode. On the last county line, we explained that if the federal shutdown continued much longer, some county services could be impacted. As you're aware, the shutdown has ended, but that could change on February 15th, which is the deadline in place for negotiations in Washington, D.C. For now, everything locally is on track, but stay tuned to your county line. If a shutdown occurs again, we'll definitely keep you updated. We'd like to thank you for joining us for this county line. If you'd like to watch past episodes, log on to yumacountyaz.gov/VOD. And remember, you can join us live on Facebook. We'll see you next time.
And let there be light, huh? All right, that is the presentation of the county line. And the next item is for financial services. I was hoping that little portion would cover that, but I guess not, huh? The presentation of the Yuma County and Jail District's comprehensive annual financial report and the presentation of the audit results for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2018, with a dreaded PowerPoint presentation to follow.
It's not going to be dreaded, I guarantee you.
Yeah, that would only be an accountant, saying that to another accountant.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Gil Villegas, Chief Financial Officer. I'm here this morning to present to you 3 of our financial statements and to give you a brief presentation on our audit for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. Before I begin with my financial statements, I would like to take this opportunity to recognize and acknowledge the efforts from staff and county agencies that really helped us this year to complete the audit so we can issue our financial statements on time. Having said that, these are the 3 of the most important reports that we produce here in Yuma County. The comprehensive annual financial report for Yuma County, the jail district, and the popular annual financial report. Both of our CAFRs, or comprehensive annual financial report, are individually audited because they represent or they give the financial condition of the entity. The popular annual financial report is not audited. However, we cannot issue the PAFR until the CAFR is completed. What the PAFR that does, it compiles or summarizes all the financial information that we have in the CAFR in a simplified and easy to read format. Now, in regards to the audit results, on December 20th, the Office of the Auditor General issued the opinions in both of our CAFRs. Both of our CAFRs receive an unmodified or clean opinion, which means that our CAFRs fairly present the financial position of Yuma County and the jail district. The statements are free of material misstatements and are free of material errors. So now we can present the statements to all the agencies that require us to have our financial statements on file for financial purposes or for continued disclosure purposes. The CAFRs have been distributed. They have been posted on our webpage, so they are for the public, ready for the public for them to view. As of today, Yuma County is in compliance with all the financial reporting requirements for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. As part of the annual audit, the auditors are required to gain an understanding of our internal controls and our processes. They want to know how we handle the information, how we process the information. They're doing this because they need to test and they need to verify the integrity of our data. Whatever we are presenting in our financial statements, they want to make sure that's coming from a proper procedure. They also issue a report on the internal controls and procedures. That report is included in the single audit report that it was provided to you, to each one of you earlier last week. In essence, their report in regards to our internal controls, they're reporting no material weaknesses or deficiencies in our processes. However, they did identify 2 findings or deficiencies that if we don't address them in the future, they might become a problem from Yuma County. These findings are specific recommendations to strengthen our internal controls over assets and financial transactions processing and help us ensure compliance. The county was required to answer or provide a response to those 2 findings. With the assistance of the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, we were able to compile the information and present a response to the auditors. I'm going to provide you a little summary of these 2 findings just for your information. The entire report, like I said, is included in the single audit report. The first finding had to do with managing risks. In the opinion of the Auditor General, the internal controls that we have in place are not adequate or they are not enough to address problems when it comes to identifying risks that might become a problem in the future. Auditor General, what they said, that we didn't have adequate processes on internal controls to identify, classified, and inventory sensitive information. The auditor suggested that we should follow the framework and the guidance of the National Institute of Standard and Technology. Auditors did recognize that we have processes and procedures in place. However, they need to be formalized and they need to be implemented. In other words, they want stronger controls in our internal processes. Like I said, the Chief Information Officer, Cliff Sommer, and I responded to the auditors and provided an action plan and time frame to address the findings. The auditors were satisfied with our response, and they allow us to issue a clean opinion on that as well.
Gil, before you leave that, oh, wait a minute, you've got that. No, go ahead. Sorry, I thought, does this have anything to do with our firewalls or anything to do with our breach of security in that?
For the Auditors General, they're just looking at internal controls and procedures. They want to make sure that we are able to identify and prevent any risk that might happen. They don't want to know, actually what they're doing, they're looking into the future to see if we're going to have any potential problems.
Right.
So that's
Oh,
how
this
they
is a
issue their
presentation,
opinion.
so it may not lend itself to discussion. I guess.
Yes, it's just a presentation.
Just a comment. Yeah.
The second finding had to do with internal controls again. And auditors recommended to have written policies and procedures in regards to system data access, system security, and profile changes. In their opinion, policies and procedures currently in place, they do not follow, or they're not enough to follow the standards of the NIST, the National Institute of Security and Technology standards. Again, the CIO and I provided an action plan and deadlines to implementation and correct the findings. The auditors were satisfied with an answer and with our plan. The deadline that we provided for both of our findings is going to be December of December of this year. By then, the CIO and I, we're going to get together and we're going to see how we can implement these plans Yuma County-wide. Finally, this is our plan for our next fiscal year.
which is the fiscal year ending 2019, June 30th, 2019. Again, the Office of the Auditor General is going to be continue to be our auditors. Probably they're going to be here with us 3 years. That's the normal engagement. They're planning already to come down and start the conversations about the audit in March 19. Even though the fiscal year is not completed and technically we're not done with the 18 audit yet, they're already planning on coming down, getting the information so we can start that audit. The financial statements will be issued within 6 months of the fiscal year end. That's a normal process for us in finance. It takes us actually 6 months to complete the entire audit and issue the financial statements. And of course, our goal for the next fiscal year is to minimize the findings any findings that we might have or the findings that we have this fiscal year. With that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Our fiscal year goes from what, June 30th to, July 1st to June 30th?
June 30th, Mr. Chairman, yes.
So when you're talking about conducting the audit, you're talking about the audit for last year? Or you're talking about the 18-19 audit?
I'm talking about the 18-19 audit. We're in current fiscal year, we are 7/1/18 to 6/30/19. This is the year that's going to get audited, starting March 19. That was my comment, that we're not even done with the audit yet, and they want to start conversations.
We're not done with the year yet. The audit's already been
Sorry,
done.
we're not done with the year, and they already want to start with the audit, so.
All right. Any questions from the rest of the board? Not, then thank you, Gil, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman. And just one last remark, their financial statements are already available and posted on our webpage, so we encourage you guys to go and take a look at them, and we welcome any feedback you might have from you guys.
I guess I must be weak on the technology because I got the big book.
Yeah.
Couple of my.
Yeah, we
You
also
didn't trust us to go to the website, right? We had to, we had to get the big hard copy. Many trees had to die because of that, you know that.
Yeah, we are required to provide you,
I'm just
each for the board members and administration, with a hard copy of our statements.
We got it.
Yeah, just
Thank you.
congratulations on your department. Findings come out very, very clean, and it shows the value of these audits to continually show improvement. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes the presentation on the financial side. The next item in the agenda is the consent calendar. The following items are listed under the consent agenda and will be considered as a group and acted upon by one motion with no separate discussion unless a board member so requests. In that event, the item will be removed from the consent calendar for separate discussion and action. There are items 1 through 8. Anybody wants to pull any of them?
Number 5, please.
Number 5. All right, item number 5. Anybody else? Then if not, I entertain a motion to approve items 1 through 8 with the exception of number 5 as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion and second to approve consent calendar items 1 through 8 with the exception of item number 5. Any discussion? No? All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries, and then we'll open up item number 5. Number 5 is for the county administrations, and it's adopt resolution number 2019-05, amending the Yuma County tax deeded property auction policy. Can Supervisor McLeod, you had a question?
I just was curious about this. Maybe we covered this and I forgot or missed it.
Just, it's old age, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Good morning, members of the board. The reason we are making a change to this resolution is because when it was brought back to you in July, I wasn't present to review some of the changes that were being made, and I didn't catch them until I came back from leave. So that's why we're making those changes and getting rid of the bid form because we no longer use it. It's only a process that that needs to be addressed if somebody is interested in bidding on a leftover parcel. And normally after the auctions, we don't have any leftover parcels, and if we do, they're either sidewalks or retention basins, so we decided to remove that form.
I still don't understand why we take it out and just in case we need it, right?
Yeah, I just, the way it reads is it takes it out of the public forum of the board, and it seems like it just puts it in the hands of the clerk of the board in an office setting or something. That's the way it seems.
You mean the auction itself?
When you read the resolution, yeah, that's how it reads.
That's how it's read for a few years, Supervisor McLeod.
Yeah.
The only change that was made this time around was to remove the bid form, which was an attachment. But the other is just a repeat of what happened back in July. The clerk of the board has been conducting the auctions for a few years now.
But it's done in the public setting, right? During a board meeting? Oh, so it's conducted by the clerk?
Yes, during
Okay.
a regular board meeting.
So all of that strike through, then, that all pertain to just simply the form that
The
we're
bid form,
replacing?
yes. Mhm.
Okay, that answers
All
my
right.
questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, if there are no other further questions on this item, I'll entertain a motion to approve the item as presented.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Then motion second to approve item number 5 as presented. Thank you. Any more discussion? None? All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries, and we move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Junior.
And the next item is for the Housing Governing Board, and I think we just reappointed Ms. Vega Esparza to the board again, so she needs to come up so that when we meet. There it is, there it is.
Hi.
Here. And we do have a low share here, I don't know. Normally, one of the board members, you know, but no, it's fine. Come in. Okay. Come in. Which necessitates a higher share normally.
Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome back. And I'm opening up discussions for the House Governing Board. The board now meets as the House Governing Board, and we'll open each of the following items separately for discussion and action as appropriate. The first one is housing. It's adopt resolution number 2019-07, adopting the Yuma County Housing Department Public Housing Agency Annual Plan for fiscal year 2019, Public Housing Residential Lease Agreement, the Capital Fund 5-year action plan, and the 2018 Capital Fund and related certifications and agreements with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Mrs. Malik Gloria?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I would like, first of all, introduce my Deputy County Director, Housing Director, Jesus Roldan. And
That's the first time I heard him Roldan, but yeah, Roldan, yeah, normally.
Roldan.
Rolled on.
Or Jesus Roldan.
Oh, that is
As
not.
per my, every time I
That's
get
a
a
good
call
one.
from
That-
them, I say,
that is a good one.
Jesus, yeah.
Jesus.
Jesus is calling.
Go ahead, Gloria. Gloria.
The
The
number
first
one.
item, yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Number one, I would like to recommend that item 1, 2, 3, and 4
Be discussed together?
need to be discussed together.
Would like to be discussed together. Okay, I'm gonna open up items 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Item 2 is to adopt and authorize the chairman to sign resolution number 2019-06. We just talked about 2019-07. Adopting the amended low rent public housing program admissions and continued occupancy policy according to the most recent federal regulations for the 3 Yuma County Housing Department's developments. Valley Vista Apartments at 8450 West Highway 95 in Somerton, Arizona. Moctezuma Apartments at 345 East Juan Sanchez Boulevard in San Luis, Arizona. And Pecan Shadows Apartment at 2650 West 3rd Street in Yuma, Arizona. Item number 3 on the agenda is also for housing, is to adopt resolution number 2019-08, approving the Yuma County Housing Department's Family Self-Sufficiency Program Action Plan. And item number 4, which is adoption of resolution number 2019-09, approving the amended Section 8 Administrative Plan for the Yuma County Housing Department's Housing Choice Voucher Program. There you go. I open up all 4 of them.
Mr. Chairman, for
Yes.
purposes of discussion, I think opening ball 4 would be appropriate, but at a time when action
Yeah,
is
at the time
taken.
of voting, we have to take them individually.
Thank you.
Each resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. All these 4 items, I recommended that it will be lumped together because they are under all our programs, which is under the Section 8 voucher program and the public housing low rent program. These are our administration plan, policy, admissions and occupied policy for our public housing and a Section 8 admission plans, and the family self-sufficiency program, which are under those both two programs. We do this every year for the beginning of the fiscal year to incorporate all the changes in the federal regulations in accordance with the changes in federal regulations, and the U.S. Department of Housing and Development, Urban and Development is requires us to
So,
make this change.
okay, so it's sort of a housekeeping thing we do every year. What we do every year is we pass these resolutions and we incorporate minor changes, normally regulatory changes that come down from HUD or from the agencies that we work with and that are incorporated into the plan. The self-sufficiency program, for example, is something we've had for a long time. And really what we do is just approve it every year, right? But the participants continue to participate. They participate in this program for years, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
So to make it even clearer, if any of the board members have any questions about any particular changes, and what I would recommend in the future, when you put it together for us, is to, highlight or redline, whatever changes are made so that we can sort of focus on that. Because normally what you give us is, a lot of documentation, but we wouldn't really be able to tell, which, what changes there are, if any, because sometimes you don't change anything. Okay, that's
Thank
for
you,
the
Mr. Chairman.
assistant there, Jesus, Shui. Jesus should understand this.
Yes.
That's, us normal human beings, we need, sort of a little more.
I guess I would have a question on that. if I
Sure,
may.
sure.
So these changes, do you make those changes or do they get sent to you, changed?
We, most of these changes are being sent to us by the HUD.
The agency.
Yeah,
The agency,
so
the HUD
would you-
agency, and some of them are in-house that we have to, particularly in the lease agreement, going back to your recommendation on the public housing lease agreement, we made a couple of changes there, sometimes from our Central Resident Council Advisory. They make
Right.
advise or recommend something, and we take that under advisement. And one of the changes there is the security deposits. We're increasing the security deposits on a $50 increment. And we haven't changed that for
So-
5-7 years already.
Right, well, that's a good change. So it would be easy to provide us with a red line version of that, but the stuff that is sent to you changed, that would be probably problematic, correct?
We couldn't change it.
To provide us with a red line version, wouldn't that be problematic for you? Or would it be easy?
If you,
That
You see what I'm getting at?
yeah, I know what
yes,
you're getting at. Yeah,
in the future, we will red line
No,
or
there isn't that many
highlight. Yeah.
changes.
There's not
Normally,
that
it's
many of the changes.
minor
It's-
changes, but it's easy. It would be easier for us, when you bring it back, it's either the same document with no changes or some document with minor changes or regulatory changes. And it'd be nice for us to be able to see that when we get the package in. And, if there's a change in there that we might find interesting, we can bring it out. It's just difficult to look at a document without, knowing what was in there before. So, we know we have to, and it's basically, it's almost a mandatory thing. I mean, they send you a change. You don't get the, talk about whether you accept it or not. They send you a change and they say, this is how it's going to be. And if you want to get this funding from HUD or from, USDA, whatever the agency may be, you have to accept those regulatory changes. So it's not that we have many choices, it's that every once in a while we'd like to see, what kind of changes are moving up the pipeline, okay?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we will.
This
do
is for
that
Jesus.
the next-
'Cause
Yes.
All right.
He's
Any-
just like, oh, good, more work.
All right. All right. Any questions on any of this? Because, like I said, it's mostly house cleaning. We have to do this every year, and we do this every year, and so the only thing that really stuck out is that every year that we do it, we sort of assume there's few changes, but there may be some important enough, especially with all the discussion at the federal level about requirements for, additional requirements, work requirements, I don't know. There's so many things coming down from Washington lately that it's tough to tell. All right. Anything that you would like to highlight at all? Everything's pretty good?
I guess those are the most, like I said, the security deposit was one of the changes.
Okay.
The number of days where a resident can move from one unit to another due to some circumstances. And I guess those are all the changes,
All right.
major changes.
Okay.
Otherwise, some of them are coming from Washington, D.C., and
They're
it's just a
incorporated.
requirement.
All right. Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve item number 1 to begin with, which is the resolution, I think it was 2019-07, and it's a 5-year action plan and 2018 capital fund and related certifications and agreements with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion on the item? If not, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries, and we move on to the next item, which is item number 2, which is adopt and authorize chairman to sign resolution number 2019-06, adopting the amended low rent public housing program missions and continued occupancy policy and at all the apartment complexes that we have. Is there a motion to that effect? Oh, this is gonna be a tough one, right?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, there's a motion and second to approve item number 2 as presented. Any discussion on the item? No? All those in favor of the item signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? We gotta move through this quickly because the county attorney just left. He left second in command there, but I don't think he's paying attention, so let's move fast. Number 3, housing. Adopt resolution number 2019-08, approving the Yuma County Housing Department's Family Self-Sufficiency Program Action Plan. This one I like a lot. I think it's one of those things that I highlight all the time about, making sure that people don't see living in public housing as something they want to do all their lives. And this is a program that helps us move them into, regular housing or move them into an educational process that allows them to basically work their way or educate their way out of public assistance. Do I hear a motion? There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Then motion and second to approve this item as presented. Any discussion on the item? None. All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. And then we move to the last item of the group, which is adopt housing resolution of 2019-09, approving the amended Section 8 administrative plan for the Yuma County Housing Department Housing Choice Voucher Program. The voucher program, just before we go into approve this, how large is the voucher program? The voucher program.
The voucher program, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we have about 401 Section 8 vouchers, which are equivalent to units, apartments that are being issued to the residents to look for units within the Yuma County's jurisdiction.
Explain that a little bit to me before we vote on this. Is the voucher program separate from the housing program that you have?
Correct.
Is it outside?
Yes, the Section 8 voucher, the public housing,
It's public
the
housing.
Lawrence Public Housing Program, we have the Yuma County owned these units, about 159 units, and we are the landlord of these units. On the Section 8 voucher program, we have private
Individuals or
individuals who would
nonprofits.
lease out, make the rent.
So the 401 is basically subsidized, it's a voucher that subsidizes rent from a public entity or a nonprofit entity that rents to people who qualify for this voucher program. Is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We
Good.
do, yes.
And do you
we
have
are, the HUDs give us the housing assistance payment that will subsidize partial of the rent for these individuals and whatever their eligibility are. Of course, there are low income,
Yeah, they
depends
all
on
have
their
to qualify.
income, yes.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Mr. Cloud?
Regarding the Section 8 voucher, if you are a tenant and you have an issue with the house that you're in, who do you go to? Do you go directly to the owner of the home or their agent? You don't have anything to do with that, right?
Well, as with the low rent public housing, we do inspect that
No, I
Section 8
understand for our
voucher
units. I'm
properties.
just talking about the
Okay,
vouchers.
yes, the voucher. Is the voucher also, we do inspect the units.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
We do.
Okay.
Annual inspections when they are going to be recertified or before they move in and after they move out. We do inspect the units. But between they move in and, they do, the tenants has to go through the landlord.
Right.
Or as a mediate, we are the mediatory
Right.
agency, that if it's not going, if it's under a quality, health and safety,
Sure.
we go mediate there and request the tenant and the landlord to do the repairs.
You make sure the houses are meet code.
We make sure
Yeah,
that
I
they
don't think I
meet.
knew that.
Yes,
You
I'm
don't?
glad I asked the
Oh,
question.
yes.
All right.
My old real estate days, yeah.
Okay, any other questions? If we have no other questions, is there a motion? Do we already have a motion?
No, I'll move it.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Been motion and second to approve item number 4, the
No.
resolution 2019-09?
No, number 5.
No,
Well,
it's number 4.
I'm
Number
sorry,
5 we haven't
4.
gotten to.
You're right, we're on the voucher.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. Adopt resolution number 2019-09. Any further discussion on the item? I want to wait a minute. All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
That's the number 4.
Yes, that was number 4.
I'll abstain.
Yes?
Supervisor Porteous is concerned he may have a conflict of interest because he has a property that leases under, I don't have the exact answer for him, so I explained to him that he could declare a conflict
Oh, no,
of
it's
interest and not participate in this event, this item, till we can get an answer for him.
All right. Okay. So he may have what we call an indirect conflict of interest, right? Okay, all right. There was a motion, there was a second. I said all those in favor, and then we got 4, and then we got an abstention. All those opposed? None. The motion carries. Item number 5, which is a housing item, also to authorize the chairman to sign the utility easements for the Valley Vista Sewer Lift Station, which grant conveys and assigns to Arizona Public Service and Arizona Corporation into its successors a non-exclusive right, privilege, and easement to enter upon, construct, reconstruct, replace, repair, operate, and maintain electrical lines together with appurtenant facilities and fixtures for use in connection therewith, for the transmission and distribution of electricity to, through, across, and beyond the strip of land situated in the county of Yuma described in the attachment A and B. That was tough.
I didn't catch that. Could you repeat?
Oh, yeah, I'll repeat that in Spanish. Now, this says that a unanimous vote is required. Is there something in particular that makes this a unanimous vote? I mean, normally I can understand a majority, but a unanimous vote is required for a granting of right of way? Do you know anything about this, John?
But
And I'm surprised
weird, huh?
this wasn't done before the lift station
The
was
sewer
put
lift
in.
station was put in.
It's kinda-
Yeah, but it looks like,
Maybe that's
it
why.
looks like it's the right of way to take power lines to the lift station, right?
Yeah,
So
but
it's
isn't it
not-
already operating?
Yeah.
Okay, so the power line's already in.
Yeah, look, it's not gonna be controversial. The question is, why does it require
Well,
a
I'm gonna vote.
unanimous vote?
I'm gonna vote no just to see what happens. This should have been done beforehand, right?
It's okay, it's okay. We got the sewer plant working. We're not gonna cut it. Anyway, look, we can do this. I mean, it's not a big issue. It just seems to be a.
Yeah, you do that.
That you would require a unanimous vote. I mean, it's really weird. Maybe it is because it's already there or something. Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
Maybe, because normally, I mean, a supermajority
be.
vote, it's like giving a
Maybe that
franchise.
one cantankerous
Well, anyway,
ally.
let's not make this a controversial issue and ruin Gloria's presentation today.
Yes,
You know,
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, let me give you a little bit history of this
background.
one. On August 19, 2015, an intergovernmental agreement, IGA, was made between the County of Yuma and the City of Somerton for the financing, construction, and repayment obligations created by the virtue of decommissioning the aging Valley Vista Water Treatment Plant facility in favor of connecting to City of Somerton's wastewater plant system. A new lift station has been constructed in the same area where the old lift station was. And before we did this, we also had requested a right-of-way for all the vendors to go in and enter and go out of that facility. So that was already approved. So now we have a new lift station that's already connected with the City of Somerton's wastewater plant system. And so the new easement request will therefore be used for maintenance and repairs related to APS electrical connection between the new lift station in Valley Vista with the City of Somerton's facility. And that's all what the APS are going in and out of the facility. They have to go through us
But
because
they
it's
already
in-
had, they had to with the old one,
They
right?
did, but it was a part of that first easement. Now it is the ongoing maintenance and repairs, like from the time that it was completed, the lift station. They already went in there as a part of the first, right of way easement.
Yeah.
No, we can't, we understand. I mean, you know, it
Mr.
was just a
Chairman,
question.
you just
of
want
why
to be
we-
difficult.
Vote.
Yeah.
The reason for the unanimous vote is under ARS subsection 40-491. The county, with unanimous consent of the board and without public auction, may grant this easement.
Oh, it's because of the public auction thing. Yeah. All right. It's
There's
not
a
like
lot
we
of
have-
items on these. I had to scroll through them to get through to it.
You know what? To be honest with you, I'm very impressed you found it that quickly.
Yes, I know.
But we're not
taken
gonna
me an
say that
hour or
again.
two.
We're only say it once every meeting. That's
I'm going to
it.
give credit to my deputy, Amanda Mann, who also posted an email to me quickly with that answer as well.
Oh.
Screen these. We're all.
All right, so it's gotta be unanimous, so please. All right, thank you. I mean, we understand that the sewer plant's operational. The city of Somerton is treating the effluent.
Thank you
And that
very
we're
much, City
okay,
of Somerton.
right? And this is just to make sure that APS can get in and out and supply power to it, right? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve item as 5 as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Then motion and second to approve item 5 as presented. We're gonna take roll call just to make sure that it's unanimous. Desiree, please. We're just testing you, Desiree, to see if you're,
Supervisor McLeod.
Hey,
that sounds a bit painful.
Ms. Vega.
Aye.
Aye. Supervisor Pancrazy.
Aye.
Supervisor Porches.
Aye.
Supervisor Simmons.
Aye.
Chairman Reyes.
Aye,
Aye.
aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Yeah. This is like a 6-member board. It could have gone either way. All right, this takes care of this. And before you step down, Gloria, we are aware that you're retiring, correct? And when is your last meeting? Is this your last meeting?
I think this is my last meeting.
Well, we want to have you back.
Oh,
No?
no, February 20th, we will be recognizing Gloria on her retirement.
Well, I recognize you in the street, but, you know, we'll be recognizing you February 20th. I thought this was the last
Without us
meeting, and because I may
recognizing
not be here the 20th, I want to make sure that I let you know how appreciative we are. You took over some difficult times over there when, I remember, you know, we lost our prior director. I'm glad you're retiring in time to enjoy some of the things left over in your life. But, you know, we appreciate the work you've done. I personally thank you for the work that you've done and the commitment you made to that, the job that you took. And so I just wanted to tell you, you know, thank you very much for what you've done.
23
okay?
years.
Yeah, it's a long
Thank
time.
you.
Have to bring a box of tissue next time.
Well, thank you. You did get, that was a unanimous vote, and I think that, again, thank you very much. And, you know, you're not gonna get it that easy, Jesus, Chewy. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you.
Oh, man, we'll put it back in here, yeah. All right, then we move on then to, I think it's discussion and action items. If I'm correct here, yes. Discussion and action items, and the first one is the action to authorize the development services director to execute a contract with Central Square to provide permit management software to Yuma County. Why isn't it on the consent agenda? Is this something in particular that makes it?
I went back and forth between putting on consent and
You
discussion.
just wanted to tell us.
And just wanted to
Brief us.
I would have
open
pulled
it up a little bit more for if you have discussion that you
All right,
wanted to have.
okay, gotcha. Go ahead.
So, we're coming to you today as stated to request authorization to purchase the software and related services for our new permit management software.
Woo-hoo.
We are first recommending this to be purchased as software as a service. The benefits that we have using software as a service is continuity of operation. So if there's natural disaster, long-term power outage, or other disruption of our internet infrastructure, we have the data stored off-site, so there's opportunity for us to open up our services faster. Company is providing us with unlimited storage for our permit data, so we have the opportunity to not be forecasting for future storage needs along those lines. There's lower overhead and personnel costs. When the software is in-house, we have to provide the storage space for the software and provide the IT technicians to maintain that software over the course of our use of it. The company provides routine upgrades and fixes to the software, so we're always working with the most current software that they offer. Within our department, we've done this with our AutoCAD software, and it works very nicely. Our interaction with the public is better because of it. The other thing that this provides us with is, because it's not stored on our equipment, we have fewer conflicts between this software and other softwares. As we've been updating our various softwares within the department over the years, we've had conflicts develop because our old permit software doesn't want to work with the newer operating systems, and so we have to delay our use of some of the other softwares because of it. And so we're recommending going with the services software, even though there's a slightly higher cost associated with that. When we look at the function of the software, there are two things we're recommending. One is the basic functions that we need to replace our software, and that is the community development modules that they offer and the Fusion product. The community development is the core permit management and GIS, Geographical Information System interface. It takes care of the input of the software of our applications all the way through, similar to what our current software does. The Fusion is what allows us to continue with online payment of permitting and things like that. So those are the two basic things that we need to continue on what we're doing. We have 3 additional modules that we're recommending to have. One is GIS Advanced. This software allows us to utilize the robust analytic tools that are in our GIS system that the county purchases under ITS, and utilize that within the environment of our permits, so that if we need to seek out radius letters, things like that, the information is stored with we don't have to leave the permit software to do that action. And so it will allow us to drop those names and lists into our software and just speed up the processes that we have. Next one is Analytics Now. This gives us the ability to see how our staff is doing, write reports on our monthly and annual basis, without going to IT to write scripts for those permits. And then finally, Bluebeam allows us to do electronic review of the software, put the notes within the system. This was an item that was within the department's strategic plan over the last 5 years. We feel that there are elements and constituents in the public that would like to have electronic review, but it's not required. We still have the ability to do paper review for those individuals that want to do that. So it's a bridge to get us moving forward into the future in that aspect. The other option that was provided to us that we're not recommending at this time is My Community. This allows us to have a communication application that people in the public could purchase and provide and get information about the public. As we've considered the benefit to the public of that, we already have systems on the service components on the website and things like that. So we felt that right now would be too much redundancy to do that. Certainly, if we decide that that's where we want to go in the future, they're willing to work with us and add that on at a later date. So, yes.
How does it work with the assessor and the treasurer?
The way that the interaction with the assessor and treasurer is through GIS. And so we will still, or the GIS division will still receive the information from the assessor that they're currently getting. This will read independently. So our systems will not touch the assessors, and the assessors will not touch our databases, but they'll be able to communicate with each other through the GIS. Furthermore, the licensing is set up to where we can provide the assessor or any other department with a license that has a need for it, and they would be able to get in and get information from the system that they need.
Will it do the same thing with Treasurer's Office, or do you not have to communicate with them? I would think on taxes and all that kind of
Right.
stuff.
They haven't expressed an interest, but they may have one. If there is one, we'd be able to provide them one as well.
With the GIS, right?
Right,
Yeah.
or providing them
GIS.
a license,
To use your program,
right.
okay.
To access.
On the first line under base modules, you'll see
Mhm.
50
community
licenses.
development, 50 licenses.
Yes.
That's a few more than what we need within our department. We're looking
Oh,
that
good.
health has some need, assessor has some need, potentially public fiduciary.
Okay,
And so if there's other departments, we can be looking at that and seeing what goes on with that.
okay. And allow
Right,
them
who-
to use your software, yeah.
Supervisor McLeod?
Does this, once this is implemented, will then contractors be able to submit online? They don't have to visit the office?
Correct.
Excellent.
Who's,
It's been a long time coming. We've been looking at this for
oh, wow.
8 years, probably 7, 8 years. It's been a desire, so that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Who's Superior Solutions Agreement? Superior Solutions Agreement.
When we began the process, they were using the name Superior,
Mhm.
and they're still a division within Central Square. Central Square is just the next higher up in the organization.
We are signing with Superior Solutions Agreement?
We'd be signing with Central Square.
So the form that's here, it's not gonna be used? We have a form here, and you said, you call it an AT&T contract, ATT contract. No, not ATT contract, and it just has Superior Solutions Agreement, and, and so I wondered, that's what they do business under, or it's in Florida?
All right, thank you for the clarification on that. Yes, the contract would be with Superior.
All right. They're in Florida. Okay, well, good, it's not election equipment, so we'll move on. All right,
They have service offices in San Diego.
all right, well, okay. Well, we've got the description of this service, and I think that Supervisor McLeod, as he mentioned,
one more
we've been trying to,
Oh,
we've
they
been trying
provide
to.
somebody to train everything? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Okay,
Can I-
hold on.
Oh,
Yeah, hold on.
Okay, I'm
All
sorry.
right.
I wanted to ask my question before we voted, that's all.
Well, I wanted to make my statement before you asked the question.
Oh,
But, I already forgot, so ask your question.
No, go ahead.
No, I mean,
You're going to talk about how long we've been wanting this.
no, I was just gonna say, we've been wanting a way for a developer to interact and for builders to actually be able to contract directly through the internet, which is the way things are done mostly now. So this is a good development in terms of, improving our system, accessibility to our system. Your question?
I'm sorry, Chairman. Craig, are they going to train your employees?
Yes. There's two different levels of training that they'd have. One is for site experts, and then others for general staff,
Usage.
yeah,
Mhm.
general users and so forth. They'll also provide us with the implementation of the program and getting it up and running for us, and they'll be working closely with IT as well.
All right,
Sorry, Chairman.
last statement.
I know this is a dumb question, but I assume that you spoke with the other 4 counties in Arizona, and they're
For
very
entities.
pleased with the product.
There,
Yeah, I would assume that you did.
yeah, they're happy with what they're doing. One of them said that they're the only place that they would work with.
Oh, is that right? Great. Thank
All
you.
right, okay,
Good.
that takes care of most of the questions. Let's have a motion and, if need some discussion. Is there a motion to approve this item as presented?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion from any members?
Tentative today.
No? All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Craig.
Congratulations.
And we'll go to development services, again, engineering, in accordance with ARS. We will conduct an auction at 9 a.m. or schedule permits of assessor parcel number 728, 03029, a county-owned excess parcel, and authorize the county engineer to execute the documents transferring the property to the highest bidder at or above the minimum bid. If there are no successful bids, we'll continue this item and authorize the county engineer to return this item to the board when there is sufficient interest to conduct an auction. If you wish to make a bid, you must register and obtain a bidder card from Barbara Villaneda at the county administration's receptionist desk. Payment in full is expected as per the terms of the sale. These will be mailed to the address noted on the bidder registration form as time permits. Chairman, I will announce the parcel number, which I did, 728-03-029, and I will request a minimum bid of $41,400, okay? Let's see, you want to do a little presentation before we go through the bidding process?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I have no presentation. It's just an item for the board to act on.
Which
I was
going to.
There was four parcels originally in this strip of land when we widened County 12th Street. We've auctioned 2 off. There's 2 remaining. So one of them is today, and we possibly have another. Actually, the house that we've been trying to auction, we'll be bringing back that item February 20th.
All right. Okay.
Are we using the bid form that we just got rid of?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we're using the bid form. We just got rid of it. We haven't got time to get rid of it. Are there anybody here that have that are registered to bid?
Mhm.
All right, so you have a bidder card, right? Yes. Okay. I'm going to request a minimum bid of $41,400. That's anybody here that bids for that amount? And your bidder number, turn it the other way. Bidder number one. Bidder number one.
Don't write on it, don't mutilate it.
That's right. Don't write or mutilate it because the price will go up by 10%. There's a bid of $41,400. Is there another bid? Is there another bid? Is there another bid? There being no other bids, sold for $41,400.
You're not a very good auctioneer.
Look, I mean, there was only one bidder. Unless you wanted to,
If you were good, you would have made him bid against himself.
What, is there something I missed?
You're going to need a motion from the board to accept.
Oh, that's
that
okay.
bid.
I sold it already. I entertain a motion to accept the bid. There's been a motion and a second to approve the bid as presented and ratify what I just done. Anybody, any discussion on the item? No discussion on the item. All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The motion carries. Okay, you have your property. Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Taking that one off our list. All right. The next item in the agenda is County Administrator Election Services. Post-election report for the 2018 midterm primary and general election. I thought we were done, but it is one of those elections that'll never go away. Keeps coming back. It's like you try to.
Good morning,
kill it,
Mr.
but it
Chairman.
won't.
Paul Melcher.
Oh, I see. You dress in black. Almost.
Paul Melcher, Interim Elections Director. I'd also like to introduce Yuma County Recorder, Robin Stallworth-Paquette. We'll be teaming up on the presentation this morning. And Mr. Chairman, knowing your affinity for long PowerPoint presentations, we reduced it this year.
You reduced it.
We shortened it because in typical past, as it was for the 2016 general election, we included in post-election action plan. We are still in the process of developing that as we move forward and anticipating the next general election cycle in 2020. So that will be a separate presentation.
All right.
The highlights of this presentation we'd like to discuss with the board today include voter turnout, a review of the new equipment and an analysis of its performance and function, some of the things that we put together to address community and entity expectations regarding elections and our outreach to the entities for whom we conduct the elections. We also wanted to present and provide information regarding the team concept that we've been developing for Yuma County in relation not only to those outside entities, but our internal departments that help support elections. And then we also have the final component, which we have described as commitment.
So reviewing the voter turnout, comparing 2014 to 2018, we went through a lot of statistics, Paul and I, to look at the differences between the last midterm to this midterm. We included a lot of numbers here that you can use as a resource if these questions come up in the future as we approach 2020. But we found it interesting that 2018 did not fall in line with our expectations, although it was a midterm election. It was a much higher turnout than the 2014 general election, the last governor's election. And early voting represents over the last few years about 75 to 80% of the total vote or ballots cast in the county. And as we all approach planning for 2020, we can use these statistics in consideration of other components such as political climate, voter habits, that type of thing, to plan as well as we can for 2020, although this particular election did prove that planning is of the utmost importance, although there will be components we're not, that surprise us every time. So.
Mr. Chairman, we also wanted to cover, just as a reminder to the board and to the members of the audience, this is the new equipment that we rolled out for both the primary and general election for this cycle. I wanted to bring to your attention, these are the new poll pads. As you can see, they're iPads, very intuitive, and we're essential in streamlining the processing of the number of election day voters that we received during the general election. These are the express vote. These took place at the touch screen. They're still touch screen and handicap accessible pieces of equipment for voting, but they go back to the ticket issuing, and the ease of voting on those is much better because the screens don't get confused, they don't roll over, everything's a separate screen, much more accessible and easier to operate. And then these are the on-site tabulators. So all these three pieces of machinery comprise what we send out to each one of the vote centers on election day. The central count ballot, we have two of these pieces of equipment to be able to tabulate ballots. The most impressive thing that we found from this was processing the 8.5 by 11 primary ballots, because they were very simple, went through because they don't have any folds on them. As we go through the machine, the number of folds that we experienced, because the ballots for the 2018 general election had 3 folds in them and they were 19 inches long. So we got experience both on the easiest and the hardest types of ballots to process through that machine. Over the course of the general election, those two machines processed in excess of 32,000 ballots. Typically, we look at it, they can process somewhere around 50 to 60 ballots per minute when they're in the 19-inch ballot styles. But again, going back through there, as you can see from the trays that helps identify both write-ins and when we have to take a look at other ballots, to the touchscreen capability. As we go back, and if we're looking at prior batches that we processed, it's very easy to go on the screen, look at the reports, and be able to find what we need instead of, if you ever recall, going and watching the old tabulation system where we were hand feeding every one of those ballots. It's certainly a much improved system.
This year, we tried something new in regard to communicating with stakeholders interested in the election process. The picture on the left-hand side is something we put together to distribute to all the stakeholders, including candidates, parties, staff, and let staff hold on to these in case questions came up over the phone. It was important to try to come up with something clear and concise as to what the expectations were, because obviously the biggest question comes along after election results have been distributed that night, and then what's left to count? What got dropped off? What do we have to tabulate, or what do we have remaining to tabulate? So this gave us a good outline to share with the public and the people that were, waiting with bated breath to find out what the final results were, and we got great feedback on it. So a huge thank you to communications, and Cindy Jocelyn helped us throw this together kind of in the final hour, and we think it was very helpful, so we will continue to work on making sure we have a tool like that. On the left hand, or I'm sorry, on the right hand side, the brochure. We generally put one of these together every election cycle. We updated it early in the year for 2018 and try to get these to as many voters as we can. We like to include them in any voter mailings that go out or to any jurisdictions, cities and towns that may be having elections. It'll include everything from voter registration deadlines, ID information, guidelines, the list of the vote centers, and a list of offices that you'll find on the ballot. So we will also, of course, do this for 2019, the smaller elections, jurisdictional elections, and 2020.
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, as Robin mentioned, this is really a team concept because when we identified some of the short-term improvements that we implemented during the election cycle, one of the real things that we wanted to focus on was the team concept because we understand how many of the departments support what election services and what the recorder's office does to put on an election. As you can see from the list, when we put it all together, it's a very comprehensive, we nearly have half of all the departments represented in one form or another. One of the real key elements that we came up with during this election cycle and proved very beneficial for the general election was we put together a short-term emergency response plan. We hadn't had anything put down in writing. We kind of knew in the back of our minds what we'd do in case something happened, electrical outage, something like that. But through the summer, we started finding out other things. For example, this half of the street might go down and lose electricity, but the other half wouldn't, and vice versa. So some of those minor things where we have communication between buildings, among different departments, we wanted to make sure we had an emergency response plan to address those items. But moving forward in some of the long-range plans that we're looking at, really cementing this team concept will be important because we were actually looking at doing some tabletop exercises. To go through an election, I think it'll be very beneficial for 2020 to plan out some of those things, considering that with the election climate the way it is, with the possible numbers of persons on the ballot for both the primary and the general election moving forward, we want to make sure that we have contingencies planned for. So some of those challenges that we'd also like to present and address with the board, we had the third-party voter registration, some of the ballot corrections that we had to address during the election itself, the public records requests and legal action summary, the early ballot volume, communications to voters, and then some of the discussions about staffing.
So many of you have, I've talked to you several times about our third-party voter registration challenges we had in the recorder's office. It was fairly difficult working through the year. Very early on, we communicated with third parties that were out in our community registering voters, and we explained some of the difficulties with incomplete forms, difficult to remedy items such as missing information, difficulty reading them, illegible, things like that. And when we talked about the volume, that was what was concerning. It's very difficult when you have a high volume of things that are incomplete or illegible, because of course at the end of the line, the voter or the voter's intent needs to be the priority, and that was difficult to work through. Because of the high rate of duplicate processing, we had thousands of registration forms that were people filling them out 2, 3, 4, up to 7 times for one voter, and that's difficult because we still have an obligation to process every single one and retain those documents. So that did require an excessive number of staff hours that put a strain on staff prior to the election really even starting. And I think that highlighted for us how early in the year the election was going to be starting. So as we mentioned, ballot corrections, there were a few ballot corrections that needed to be addressed, and we've discussed, I think each of you has probably been in the office or had conversations with each of us on how to best remedy those issues, and I'm pretty proud of the ability of our 2 offices to work together and find a solution that best met the needs of the voters. It didn't necessarily best meet the needs of staff or easy for us or the county, but we worked really hard to make sure that we created as little interruption to the voter as possible. Public records requests, legal actions were very interesting this year. We were not expecting the level or the number of public records requests that we received from different entities or stakeholders in the election. So there were individual requests that were coming in 3 to 4 times a day over the last 7 to 10 days. And those requests were asking for very custom reports of numbers of ballots out, who's received ballots, who has returned ballots, which ballots are waiting for corrections or signature issues, things like that. And I think we're going to see some changes in legislation as we address some of these difficulties. We had a conversation last week, the reporters did, with a few legislators that are interested in ensuring that the stakeholders can get the information, we can do our, work through the election without interruption or disruption, and make sure that these types of items don't slow down the processing. Because again, at the end of the day, the most important thing is serving the voter and the community and the ability to process the election quickly. So because of the time limits and disruptions on filling those requests and wanting to be responsive, it was something we weren't necessarily expecting. One did involve a legal action, and a huge thank you, of course, to the county attorney's office, who is on speed dial for some of those more complicated questions. So, early ballot volume, of course, was a little higher than we expected, again, for a midterm. The permanent early voting list has grown to just under 61,000. I think that number has increased since we put this PowerPoint together. Early ballot returns are, again, reflecting approximately 80% of the ballots cast in a countywide election. And another one of the challenges the staff in the recorder's office had difficulty with, and I think it did affect the staff in elections as well, because you have a lot of phone calls during the day in regard to questions. Voters received a lot of text messages similar to these that I snipped out here. A few times there were text messages that said, your ballot has not been received, please make sure you return it. And a lot of times those ballots were already received, they were already tabulated, and it was confusing to the voter. So we were having difficulty kind of working backwards, trying to find out what data they were using to communicate with voters, because of course their hope is to be effective. They don't want to waste their time as whether it's campaigns, candidates, but many voters had already returned ballots. Many of them were counted, and it caused some frustration. Voters were very upset when they call and say, hey, my ballot isn't there, but I returned it a week ago. So we're going to have to work through that and try to work through communicating with candidates on that. There was a high volume of inquiries on not just text messages, but emails and types of things that were very similar to that. And it does drastically slow our process down, because a lot of those phone calls, we were hundreds of phone calls every day on questions that we felt like were unnecessary for the voter to worry about, because they were, we had taken care of ballots and tabulation had already begun. Of course, all of these challenges affect staffing. Probably the biggest piece was volume in regard to not just the early ballots, but when you have early ballots, you have tabulation. So both the recorder's office and elections had a large number of excessive hours and comp time and overtime, and we utilized a lot of temporary staff that we did not use in the midterm for 2014.
Question? Robin, have you looked into, is it possible that you would be able to put on the website a system that when a voter's ballot is tabulated, that it is accessible on the website that they can go and check? Is that something that we could look at doing?
Yes, Chairman Reyes, Supervisor McLeod, there is currently a tool. It's called Voter View. It's linked to the Secretary of State's website, but there is a delay, and sometimes we were seeing a delay of 1 or 2 days. So that was a little bit of a concern. But the other thing that was difficult was perhaps we've already transferred the ballots to the elections department, and there's several ballots in there that we know, we can see we've accepted them, we can see everything's been processed, but there was a few issues with the statutory language requiring the elections office can't start tabulating until a certain point. Mm-hmm. So in those few days, they were just waiting for that day that they could start doing the volume that they were receiving. So it's kind of just a couple holes in there that we need to clean up, and I think legislation may help us with that. Obviously, there's been legislation introduced that's problematic, but I think we're starting to roll around to conversations that maybe work through these challenges and help us maybe clean it up.
How can legislature help you with something that you have no control over at all? I mean, like this, text messaging.
Well, the biggest pieces that just came up on Friday when we talked to a few legislators was the public records request. They want that information to be able to touch voters depending on who they're trying to reach out to. The information for the voters, the website for voter view, like you asked about, is helpful. There is still there's a small delay. But in the event it was possible through legislation to allow the elections department to start tabulating earlier than they're able to now, we would have a lot more reflecting accurate status. And I think that may be necessary for all the counties, because with the volume increasing, that just means elections volume is increasing earlier. So.
Sure.
Robin, just to clarify, so the Secretary of State, for the voter view, they get that information from you or from elections?
They get the information out of the statewide voter registration database. We log it as processed.
Right.
And it'll go over to elections. And I'm not really sure what the components show, because it'll show received and it'll show counted, something like that. So I think with the new voter registration system, they're going to clean up some of those things so it's an accurate reflection. But again, I think if we can start tabulating a little earlier and once we're getting them.
So it records both, received and tabulated? Yes. Interesting.
Okay.
There's also a verified section, I think, when it reflects. And then the other question is when you have a signature that doesn't match or you have a missing signature, making sure that that's accurately reflected, because many of the public records requests were pertaining to signatures that were missing or didn't match our records, which were only a few hundred in this county, but that's what many of the requests were seeking.
All right. Okay. This was a very highly sensitive one. Election. So a lot of these issues came up because of the sensitivity.
Yes.
Well, and Mr. Chairman and members of the board, one of the things that Robin mentioned is that we're already up voter registration over 3,000 from the end of the general election.
Wow.
And sometimes these inactives too pose a problem. That's for, when people come up and they're, particularly on election day and attempting to vote in inactive, sometimes it takes a little bit to get those processed to understand why there's an inactive. So it'd be really nice if this number would be reduced and get back up there into the active rolls or whatever. But I think it's just a good concept here to understand that we increased voter reg 9% since the 2016 general, but overall, again, going back since the end of the general election, we're up roughly 3,000 new registered voters already.
Mr. Chair and Robin, are other counties seeing an increase in the number of early voting ballots?
Chairman Reyes, Supervisor Pancrezi, yes. The largest increase in change in the in each election in the last probably 6 years has been a very steady increase in the early ballots sent and the early ballots received, and the representation of where those fall as far as the total number of ballots cast.
And Mr. Chair and Robin,
yes.
And so ballots have to be returned, but ballots could be, when are the first ballots returned? I mean, how much time is there usually that just till you see the first ballots coming in?
We send the ballots out 27 days before the election. So we will see the first large delivery of ballots the following Monday. So that's always going to be a Wednesday. So the following, say 5 days later, we'll start to receive some. I will tell you, if you were in our office right after ballots went out, what we were all surprised at, and we would go over to elections and say, we're really shocked. Like every day the mailman came in with bins of ballots, which we weren't surprised at that. We were surprised at how steady it was. Usually we see them, the larger numbers, 10 to 14 days after we mail them out. We were seeing them immediately, and that the stack of bins, just every day they would start coming in, which actually made it easier to process, but we were surprised how quickly voters were responding, and that's probably a good sign that we can reach them and try to get them back.
Mr. Chair and Robin, so how many days is it before elections can start counting them?
7 days prior to the beginning of the election.
Oh my gosh,
Prior to
you
the
have to
beginning, or
hold
prior
I
them
mean,
to the
prior to
election day?
the election day,
The
excuse me.
election day.
Yeah, I always think of the election
5
days.
days, 5 days?
7 days.
7 days, so you have to hold them 20 days, so to
Well,
speak.
depending also on the processing, how that goes, because we have the early board that would have to take place in between there. So that would be the initiation of receiving those ballots, getting them processed through the early board so they could be tabulated.
Wow. So, Mr. Chair and Robin,
Yes.
what are you guys looking at as to changing the legislation? How are you considering it?
Chairman Reyes, Supervisor Pancrazi, haven't yet had a chance to talk to Paul about this, but heard some ideas on Friday at a meeting that I think maybe elections directors have already discussed this, but we have logic and accuracy testing on the election side by the Secretary of State's office. I don't know how quickly, I saw the dates this morning.
Usually
but
10 days before.
But the first one.
Oh, the first one. So logic and accuracy usually is split up into two portions because since we have a hybrid system, part of our system is tested. So it was October 5th, so roughly 32 days before the election, we had the first set of logic and accuracy, and then the last set was October 23rd. So,
We'd like to see that happen after LNA testing.
yeah.
Mhm.
So
You
right
know
once
you
the
tested.
testing is complete.
So once the testing's done, you can start counting ballots. I'm sorry.
Supervisor
Mr. Chair.
Pancrazi, the question about legislation, I think that it's going to be more down Paul's way when when it so happens to come up. And, that's going to take, for us to keep an eye on it and for you to bring it up, so that we can see if there's something we can support or something we don't want to support as a board. Because there's going to be we normally don't even get into that. Technically speaking, we've been here for years, and the last thing we do normally is step into some of those issues. But if we're going to, make sure that it comes out, to the whole board before we start taking positions individually, and create a situation that maybe later on it's a problem. Okay. All right. Continue.
One more thing, just back to Supervisor Pancrazi's question. The suggestion and conversation is to perhaps suggest after the testing is complete to be able to tackle tabulation.
Thank you.
If the county is able to. These are the early voting statistics, 2016 and 18. I use these numbers specifically because we both found it interesting that our statistics closely match the 2016 election more so than they match the 2014 midterm election. Of course, in planning, we're looking at the 2014 midterm and any hot ticket items that might be on the ballot. However, our numbers, what we sent out in ballots was a large increase from the 2016 cycle. What we had returned wasn't as high as the 2016 general, but again, it was very, very close. And what we sent out, even though they haven't been returned yet, we're constantly processing those records to keep track of the status of those that are out in the community pending. So these are the percentage returns, specific numbers, and I included the cost of the ballot package because I know we've had conversation about that in the past and what it costs to distribute and the return cost.
Supervisor McLeod?
Thank you for touching on that. That's what I wanted to bring up for the public. If you look at that, almost half of the cost of running that election for early ballots was wasted by the public. And, if you're going to request an early ballot, return the thing or tell them don't send you one. That's a lot of taxpayer dollars that just went out and down the toilet. And I think
Well,
that's
up in the
very
mail. I
frustrating.
don't think it flushed down the toilet, but it was lost somewhere.
Well,
It went in the trash, I can tell you that, or it's sitting on somebody's counter.
And Chairman Reyes, Supervisor McLeod, what we have, what we will continue to talk about is maybe a more creative strategy in reflecting the $1.44 cost to the voters, because voters may know that they're not going to participate or they're going to be out of town, they're going to be going to a vote center. So perhaps this is just something we haven't communicated effectively to voters to let them know this is taxpayer money. We perhaps can save some there.
But I do want to make the point that has happened even with election day voting. You have this huge number of people deployed for 700 people that go vote. So if you look at it from that perspective, it may be cheaper actually, to have a person send them a ballot and have it returned back than to have so many voting places and so many hours. Well, the hours won't change. But we staff quite a few voting centers now. And, people are not using them like they used to. So when you subtract the cost of having a voting center set up and working for 12 hours or 14 hours a day, and you add all those numbers and you divide them by 600 people, you're going to end up with a per voter cost that's way higher than the $1.40 that it takes you to process an early ballot. So there are some offset here. I mean, the election process is changing. The city of San Luis is conducting an all-mail ballot election relatively soon, I think.
21st.
And that's because you don't have to set up anything. It's processed through the mail. People who want to participate will do so. People who don't want to won't, even if you set it up, next to their homes.
Yes, Chairman Reyes and Supervisor McLeod, I think what we have had, what we need to explain to the voters is, of course, those vote centers are set up with as efficient planning as you can. However, you have to plan for, of course, more people coming than have in the past. The issue is many people go to the vote center who do have an early ballot, and that's where additional costs are then extended on the vote center side because you have provisional ballots. And we've done a great job in Yuma County taking on a new procedure to try to not make those voters vote provisional, thus slowing down the election results. But it's kind of just like it's just a moving puzzle.
But there's a reason. If you're holding an early ballot on a Friday, before the election on Tuesday, you may not trust the mail system to get it to you guys. So that also creates the issue of, okay, what do I do with this ballot, right? So I've got to go to the center and pick it up. Maybe more of those boxes that, those mail-like boxes that you set up in some particular places would help. Get those people to realize that if they put it in that one, they don't have to trust the post office. It's almost like delivering it, to the.
And Chairman Reyes, one number for the 58 cents and the cost of the ballot package return, we have noted to some voters that, of course, dropping it at the box right in front of our office, we're cleaning out that box a few times a day, real close to the election. And on a positive note, each one of those ballots, we have saved 58 cents instead of postage. But we were at our meeting on Friday, I mentioned some of the counties are paying 55 cents. And I was really irritated because Yuma pays 58 cents. So we're trying to figure out why do some counties pay less, and apparently there's special sometimes at the post office. So we're working on little things like that because even if it's 3 cents, we can save. There are little pieces that we can creatively figure out how to reflect a little bit of cost savings as the numbers keep
going up. All right, continue because we stopped.
Well, Mr. Chair, just as you were talking about the participation of the vote centers, one of the things I wanted to draw the board's attention is when we look at the Civic Center and the mega centers here, comprise the highest total of voters. But if you look also for Martin Luther King and the Health Department, which are two smaller vote centers that only having the 5 pieces of equipment per vote center, we had very high turnout in those 2 areas. We've always known that those areas had their limitations, particularly MLK because of the parking. If the parking was larger, I'm sure that even participation would be higher. So we'll have to look at some of the ways of expanding or changing the outlay for those 2 vote centers to accommodate that high voter turnout.
Yeah.
The health department, we might be able to even open up the 3rd portion of the area to be able to stretch it out and add more pieces of equipment, change the layout, those kind of things to make it more effective. I think the real good thing that we have in South County in relation to San Luis, Somerton, and the Cesar Chavez Center is the locations now, since we have the tents set up for political activity, there's plenty of parking. And at Cesar Chavez, we know that there's even underutilized parking that we can meet the needs of South County voters moving forward. I think the real important components, again, will be addressing the ability of voters to access those 2 vote centers and then to be able to go through the system quickly. We do know that the mega centers worked really well during the general election because we had a very steady stream of voters all day long. Every time I visited the Civic Center, Vote Center, it was very busy and packed, but with the new equipment, with the new training, everything went forward successfully and they were able to process that. When we would look at the vote centers overall, we did not have any wait times exceeding 20 minutes. That's our first goal. And I didn't get any reports very much. We had one wait time in San Luis that was longer because we had to switch out the ballot on demand ink from another source, but they were able to vote on the machines. The wait lines were able to be reduced and we moved on. So very successful overall.
We included a couple of interesting comparisons when you look at the 2014 to the 2018 midterm, and as I mentioned, the more aligned comparison was the 2016 presidential. So we included some of these statistics for your information as we approach 2020, so you can use some of that for your own reference. We were very surprised to send out that high 79% more of the ballots that were actually processed before the election day happened, and then elections department prepared on election day to process 106% more voters with, as Paul mentioned, a 20 minute at the most wait time. So we had a lot less early and provisional ballots dropped off at the vote centers. They're still frustrating, no matter the number that are dropped off at the vote centers to process later. We have decreased that a lot, so we are proud of that. And the 2016 presidential we just didn't see that much difference between the two. So just for your resource.
And Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to bring the board's attention to the elections website. For the primary reason, as Robin had stated earlier, there's a lot of information on the website relating to how people can register to vote, where to vote, and how that process occurs. I just wanted a reminder to the Board of Supervisors that it also includes several other components, including campaign finance, all of those good reports that the candidates and elected officials need to fill out.
Right.
So, Mr. Chair,
yeah,
looking forward to 2020. We've referenced it several times, looking forward to that election, because I think preparedness is what's taught us over these last two election cycles. That Robin mentioned being prepared for the unexpected, and I think that's the real key here when we look at that. But these are some of the areas that we're going to utilize to be able to prevent some of those, or at least to be able to address them on the fly. One of the things is looking at training. We know that what we've seen in terms of the interaction between both the Recorder's Office and Elections Services Division has been outstanding, but it's also been continuing and expanding. When we look at the overlaps that occur between people asking questions, voters calling in to ask questions, there's some cross-training there that we can do to make that seem seamless so that it doesn't appear that there are two different departments. The other thing is we are looking at the continued training of the individual boards. They've had their first round of training on the equipment, but I think there are some other things that we can do throughout the system. When we look at not only processing early ballots, but it's intake, ballot intake on election night, processing after that, just making sure all those systems are in place, because having those workers better trained helps make our jobs much easier on the other end if we're not having to audit several times to make sure we got the right results.
All right.
In regard to budget goals, I think, as I mentioned, we're just looking at smaller creative ways to reflect a cost savings across both departments, as well as making better use of funding that we are expending for staff time, overtime, and comp time, to make better use of how we arrange that, and being attentive to the in-person voting, as we've talked about before with the early voting increases. We also see a more consistent flow of people walking in to vote. So for those 27 days, people can walk into the county's offices, the Recorder's Office, and vote. And I think that number is rising. Aside from it rising, it's more consistent than it has been in the past over the long term, or the several weeks that people can early vote. So we have been very diligent in making that space a secure environment for this integrity of the election, and
I hope you noticed
able to meet the voters. So, and again, efficiency measures that I think both of us have been able to recognize that will help with cross-training and that type of.
Oh, you moved it quickly. You didn't want us to check efficiency on it, huh?
We were very efficient in how we were using our ease.
Yeah, I was looking at that efficiency while hoping to get to it, but you moved it really quick. That was a good
So,
spelling
Mr. Chair,
issue.
members of the board, that concludes our presentation. If you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
I have a question.
Yeah, Supervisor Porches has a question.
Robin, on the mail ballots, if I live in Yuma and I mail it, when would do you receive it like from the post office here, or does it go to you, Phoenix?
It goes to Phoenix.
Chairman Reyes, Supervisor Portis, unfortunately, all of the mail is processed. Even if it's dropped off here, it's sent to Phoenix and then returned back here. So although that seems, I don't know.
Inefficient. That seems
To me,
inefficient.
there may be a reason, yes. But they have been pretty quick about, we'll see it in a couple of days. There were small chunks of ballots that we didn't see for 5 or 6 days that caused some concern, but they're very responsive when we try to discuss that with them. We actually had a few people with the post office this time, even the person that walks in delivering all of those ballots, that were so helpful. They had our back for 27 days. They saw stuff at the post office when they got off shift and they brought it down here. There was a few key people that were very happy to work with. So I don't know why that situation exists for their logistics, but we'll do some more research into that as well.
All right.
And I just want to add, just because I know this, if I want to mail something from Somerton to Yuma, from Somerton it takes one more day to go to be mailed out to, or for the post office to do their process, because Somerton will will bring the mail till 3:30, after 3:30. So Yuma doesn't process it till the following day. And then so it adds a day. And I think San Luis, it adds 2 days because it stopped in Somerton.
It's weird. Efficiency. It's not the post office main.
It's interesting because Chairman Reyes, Supervisor Portis, we also found out at the after Election Day when we were still processing, it was quite a hurried time frame. We found out that there are more people utilizing physical or using post office boxes in South County than there are post office boxes, and that's very interesting to me because that creates another layer of delay for the voter. And so we also want to make the best use of the options that those voters have walking into the office, and
Well, that's
not
because
having to walk into a very busy post office and go through that.
that's normally because there's a family box, and the family could be 4 or 5 members of the family that, receive a ballot. So you get them in one box, and, you have to move out and get a new address to get a box. And it's a process, so.
And Chairman Reyes, I found it interesting that the post office relayed to us that if you were going to get a post office box now in South County, you would now be sharing a post office number with a sub box that you have to physically walk in and deal with a clerk instead of opening a box physically.
Now they're running out of space.
Yeah.
It's a difficult situation.
So
There's
it has
no
the same,
enough boxes for the number of people.
address, but it's different people
There's
that
a
are using.
yeah.
Yeah, let's not get into that one.
And
That's going to be a
and
long
there's
one.
probably ways we can approach that differently as soon as those the big push of mail outs happen. So
Thank you, guys. That was a pretty thorough presentation. Thank you very
you.
much. You know what I'm going to do is, though I love to have you guys go through all the meetings, I'm going to skip the presentation until after the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, because you guys have been really patient, but I don't think I can drag you to another PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to leave item number 4, move it to the end, and take the Planning and Zoning agenda, which is, full legal description of property size for all rezoning cases are available for review at the Yuma County Board of Supervisors office. We have a regular public hearing item, which we moved to this meeting. Staff will make a full presentation. It doesn't have to, but it can, on each of the following items, followed by separate discussion, public hearing, and action by the Board of Supervisors. This was necessitated because we wanted Supervisor McLeod to be present. Development Service Planning Zoning Division, a special use permit case number 1809, John Mahone, agent for Michael B. Bean, requests a special use permit for section 601.03Y of the Yuma County zoning ordinance to allow a wireless communication facility in a parcel of 5.0 gross acres in size, zone rural area 5 acre minimum, assessors parcels number 724-52004, located at 13686 South Avenue 5E in Yuma, Arizona. Mr. Mahon submitted a request to postpone the item for 30 days in order to work on a neighborhood outreach and modified site plan. This is really up to the board. I mean, I think we postponed it for, was it 2 weeks? 2 weeks. I think we sort of, I think that the people who show up, deserve an answer at some particular point in time, and postponing it may not change that answer. But it's up to the board. If you want to, postpone the item, we will conduct a public hearing anyway, because, whenever the public shows up, we feel responsible. If we call them in for a meeting and we say there's going to be a public hearing, there is going to be a public hearing. So, would you please open up the item? Anyway, even if we postpone the decision, we're still going to open up the public item. We may not make the decision if we want to postpone it, but we're still going to have to conduct some sort of
And
public hearing.
just to throw that out there in case something happens to me between now and then. If you do postpone it to a date and time, so we don't have to repost.
Yeah, they certain.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure, Supervisor McLeod.
Is the applicant here?
I don't see it.
No, Mr. Sherman, the applicant's not here today.
Neither is his agent.
Yeah, she is.
Oh. Oh, no, don't let him
Come
in.
outside, we don't need him.
I can leave if you want.
No.
The plan did not work, people. He knocked on the door, he got back in. Dang it. All right, so you were gonna say something, Supervisor McLeod, regarding the fact that the applicant isn't here. He was here last time.
Yeah. Sure, I can probably save us a lot of time. I have quite a bit to say,
Okay.
but I think I can save us time. For those of you who are here on this matter, a couple of things I want to say to you.
Hold
Where I
on,
live-
hold on. I just want to check and make sure that, we're okay with the process here. Do we want to open up the item first before you go in?
We have to
Why
have
don't
the presentation.
Yeah, we have to at least open it,
You should go ahead and open the item.
and then,
It
ask
is
the
open.
question, then make the comment.
Leave it open, make sure we open
'Cause I
the
haven't
public
opened it
hearing
yet.
in case they want to respond. I don't know if we need a presentation
We don't.
again, because we've already had it, unless that's the request of the board members.
Why don't you just
Okay.
give us a brief summary, not a full presentation of, the planning and zoning recommends, it's the stuff you do without getting into a lot of detail. I like to speed it up a little.
Mr. Sherman, staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission for this item is recommending approval with the following conditions. I'm gonna go to the slide that shows some.
The site plan, the elevation.
This is the elevation. It's 140 feet high. And the location on the northwest corner of Avenue 5B and County 13 3/4 Street. This map shows other towers in the vicinity. And we received petitions and a lot of neighbors in opposition. This requires a supermajority vote by the board of supervisors. And this map shows that most of the property owners around oppose the project. And like I said, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval with this operational conditions 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5, and one performance condition, which is the waiver.
Yeah,
And,
which we normally request all the time.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
All right, now Supervisor McLeod, we get into the discussion by board members. Go ahead. Save us time.
I think I can, but I'd like to explain something first. Infrastructure is important to Yuma County. These cell towers are unattractive. Nobody wants them in their backyard. But our farmers, our citizens expect to be able to use the data that they need. Farming community is short on data that they need to do a more efficient and effective job of farming, which is good for all of us and all of our citizens, not just of our state, our county, but nationwide. Infrastructure is important. I have a home that looks out over the North Gila Valley. Within the past year, this board voted, and I voted in favor of a cell tower that's directly in my view shed. I knew it would be. It's got a red light on it at night, and I hate that cell tower. Every night in my living room, it's blinking out of the corner of my eye. Multiple times a night, it just catches my attention and I look outside to see what that was, even though I know it's there. I detest that cell tower, and I knew that I would, but I voted in favor of it because I knew that the infrastructure was needed in that area of the county. So I also voted in favor of a power transmission line, but I would have preferred to go a different direction. For whatever reason, the engineers of these power lines, every so often there's one pole that's much larger than the others. That one is directly in the center of my view. And I knew it would be, but I voted in favor of it because the alternate route would have cost APS close to $1 million more, and that's all of our dollars. So as a responsible board member, I voted in favor of it. So none of us want these things in our backyard. I don't like it any more than the rest of you do, but these things are necessary. With that said, nothing has generated as much communication from the public in my time on the board, with the exception of an issue with some elderly dogs. So in light of that, and in respect for those of you who have joined the process and communicated with the board members, this is in my district. I'm not pleased that the applicant's not here. I'm going to move that we deny this request.
I got to open to the public, though, before you make the motion first.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I normally use a statement that applies to mostly attorneys, and I always tell them, look, you got to know when to quit, where you're ahead. I'm going to use it today to tell you that we've heard your case, your presentations. We know how united the opposition is to this particular situation, and that if you have something new to add that we haven't heard, that you step up. You know, I'm going to open it to the public, but that essentially, you know, try not to make the same statement over and over again. We know all of you are opposed to this. Is there someone that isn't opposed to it that wants to say something? I figured that out already. So I'm going to open it to the public. If there's someone that, you know, just wants to, you know, kind of make it a last sort of statement, you're welcome to make it. You know what the motion is already, or will be. The motion will be to deny. So it's open to the public. Does anybody want to go up in front of the, you know, in front of the board and make a final statement? Sure. Seem to, you know, this is, you know, I don't think I've heard you make the statement. So,
Mr. Chairman, Cesar Dominguez, 13484 South Avenue 5E, just on the other side of the canal there. We were just made aware of this motion. The residents came to our house, and my wife and I agreed to object to it because we do agree that we do need infrastructure, but when you have a cell phone tower that looks like 30, 50 feet and it's disguised like a palm tree, that's one thing. But when you have a 140-foot tower that they're only saying it's going to be a cell tower, we disagree with it. And I'm sure we weren't here for the other meetings. We didn't know about it, but we just want to show our opposition.
all right, thank you, Mr. Dominguez. All right, I am going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Now you can make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you have somebody.
Remember what I just said? All right, sure, certainly,
Yes,
something,
it is.
come up, please.
Thanks for this opportunity. My name is Mike Vandevelde. This is my wife, Maureen. And I'm an amateur radio operator working with the Yuma Auxiliary Communication Service and other ham radio operators to support our local communication service. We do this by monitoring for emergency calls, providing communications and support in times when normal communications are out of service. We also provide communication support during public events like the Veterans Day Parade, local charity bike rides, rodeo parades, etc. This cell tower is less than 2,000 feet from my home, and my fear is that once this cell tower is erected, it will cause radio interference. I have experienced such interference several times in and out of Yuma. And from what looked like radio or cell phone towers. Such interference can prevent us from serving Yuma when we are needed most. We're also concerned about the cell tower being on the edge of residential area. This can cause degradation of property values, possible increase of lightning strikes. As a result of this high tower, residents experience long-term health degradation and this neighborhood becoming an industrial park. There is already a cell tower on the A Canal, less than 1.5 miles away. Is this new tower really needed? If so, move it out of the residential area and into an undeveloped remote area. Thank you so much, and please vote no.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anybody else? Then I will then close the public hearing and go back to the board. And Supervisor McLeod?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for the record, part of my calculus on this, that 140-foot tower is very tall. And moving it not too awfully far away where it's not in the middle of a residential area shouldn't be difficult for the applicant. They'll still get the coverage that they need. That also figured into my thinking why I will go ahead and move to deny this application.
Right. It's a motion to deny. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and second to deny the application for the cell tower. The application is special use permit case number 18-09. We found ourselves in a difficult position of denying a request for an extension. Normally we would be given that, but I don't think there's much that can be said that can probably sway the mind of the people that are now here in opposition. So there's been a motion and a second for denial of the application, the special use permit. Any discussion? No more discussion? All those in
just a comment, Chair. Mr. Chair.
Sure.
You know, like Mr. Russell,
Mr.
McLeod said, infrastructure is very important, and I know just throughout the last year, there's been a movement within Yuma County that we don't throughout rural areas, we don't get 4G
broadband,
and there's been talks about why we pay for it but we don't get it. So eventually we'll be seeing more of these cases coming up because towers, that's the only way that they can probably transmit it. So for us to get 4G, even the farmers need it. So they're the ones that are really pushing for it because now with technology, their tractors are just depending on GPS. And when we don't get that 4G and we're paying for it, we'll eventually be seeing more of these cases. So.
Yeah. Hopefully they start choosing sites that are a little less in the middle of neighborhoods, which is difficult because they're trying to cover more areas. So, all right, maybe some of those farmers will offer their land. There's been no more additional discussion. All those in favor of the motion signify by state. One comment.
One more comment is, for this issue alone, behind the peanut pad is a tower that's already 140 feet high or close to it. It seems to me that the location of this one should be somewhere close to that so that because it won't, it's in an open area and it won't degrade anybody's property values.
Yeah, well, as a statement that probably the applicant would make, these locations are all chosen by, some sort of a measurement from one location to another that creates a circle of service. So it's pretty complicated, as they tell me. It's pretty complicated to, in other words, they don't just pick a site. They have to be in a certain location around a certain area. But anyway, we've listened to all the support and opposition to this item. I think we've heard enough. There's been a motion and a second to deny the permit because it takes a supermajority for approval. I'm still going to take a roll call vote just to make sure that the record reflects that there's, who voted for and against it. Desiree?
Supervisor McLeod?
Aye.
Supervisor Pancrazzi?
Aye.
Supervisor Porches?
Aye.
Supervisor Simmons?
Aye.
Chairman Reyes?
Aye. The motion is denied unanimously. So thank you for showing up and thank you for continue. We don't get many of those.
Thank you for
Give you time for
participating
showing
in your
up.
government.
We're going to give them time to, move out a little bit. So now, just in case everybody else that stays here, I'm going to go back and take on item number, which was the last one on the action items. It was item number 4, county administration discussion with possible action regarding the following legislative items: a report to the Board of Supervisors regarding proposed bills in the Arizona State Legislature with impact to Yuma County, an update of the development of federal talking points memorandum for the upcoming trip to Washington, D.C. to meet with our congressional delegation. Paul, you back up.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Well, yeah, it's still morning, yes, but, you know, we're trying not to, huh?
So I'll keep it brief in response to your request last time. I provided
That was the same request.
I provided a truncated list of the bills on here. So these are the top ones that right now are being discussed or have been just dropped, and I wanted to review them quickly. So the one about the bill history for 2522 was actually vetoed on Friday by the governor. That was the conformity bill that was discussed about the tax rates, the Arizona state tax rates conforming with the federal tax rates. There's been a lot of discussion about leaving those tax rates the same as the feds do in order to enhance the rainy day fund for the state in anticipation of some kind of recessionary activity. So we'll see how that moves forward. The other one, the next one is 2536. This one was just recently dropped in relation to the increase in fuel taxes. Currently, fuel taxes are 18 cents more or less on a gallon of fuel for Arizona. That's actually the federal rate is just only slightly higher at 18 point a couple more cents. But what this bill does is it proposes to increase the tax rates as included in the bill, but it also accounts for future increases based on a deflator index from the Department of Labor and Statistics. So that would be like the CPIU, some kind of CPI index, so that you would not have, so in the future, all the taxes would be indexed on, tax increases would be indexed on one of those rates, so you wouldn't have a static fuel tax on per gallon purchases anymore. So the bill history, then next going to the joint resolutions, there were a joint resolution and then a bill introduced for the governor's drought contingency plan. So we expect that to pass as it was proposed, because that's, the governor pretty much stated that that's what they wanted to have occurred. The most important one in relation to elections coming up is Senate Bill 1072. Further rereading of that statute seemed to imply that the intent was to eliminate vote centers altogether. So election staff and the recorders have been working with Senator Rita to get the language modified so that it's clear that it's only addressing the early voting aspect of it and not eliminating vote centers. And then finally, in relation to another bill that was probably expected to drop based on the CSA back in October, was Senate Bill 1165, which prohibits the use of portable wireless communication devices while driving except under emergency circumstances. Essentially what the bill does is state that any drivers have to be using their portable, any cell phones or portable messaging devices with hands-free units, unless there's some kind of accident that prohibits that, where the occupant would have to make a direct call and use the phone and put it in their hands. Mr. Chairman, those are the top 5 moving forward that have garnered the most interest in discussion at this point. I'd be happy to entertain any questions if the board has them.
Good bills. No, it's fine.
Great.
Continue.
So, Mr. Chair, then the next thing I'd do is draw your attention to the talking points memorandum. Based on the comments that you had provided at the last meeting, I went back and have finalized both the talking points and the action points for each one of these. So quickly, if you'll notice that each one of the statements underneath the title, so for example, the title is continued funding of payment in lieu of taxes. So each one of these statements has been formulated into an action that we're requesting. So in the first one, we're requesting appropriation of funding for PILT program for the next 5 fiscal years. Give us something to go through and be able to have that expectancy for budgeting PILT in the out years. The next one, in restoring the state criminal alien assistance program. We know that the program had been funded in the past, going back, so we're just simply requesting that we'd go back to get full funding for that program. Onto the next page. These are the ones that I've been working on in relation to the port. As we've been talking more about the port issues, we looked at them more globally than in particular to San Luis one or two at separate times. So the first one that we've done is talk about, we want equivalent crossing for both the San Luis 2 commercial port of entry and the Calexico port of entry. The Calexico port of entry has an MOU with Caltrans so that they've established the inspection protocols, minimize them, and the other advantage is that Caltrans doesn't have a facility at any of the port facilities. So we want to make them all equal. So the talking points here requested that that ADOT and Arizona Department of Transportation get the same type of memorandum of understanding approved, and then that we're still asking that they not establish a federal motor carriers inspection point at the San Luis port. The other one that we talked about here has been revolving is the San Luis overall improvements to both ports in terms of effectiveness and efficiency in processing both commercial and private travel. As you'll note in the first 4 bullet points, we specified several infrastructure improvements that we recommend based on the outreach I've conducted with the stakeholders to get accomplished. You'll note that San Luis 1 widening to 6 lanes is the primary one. And then at the bottom, you'll also note for item number 3, the understanding is that once this last expansion is done at San Luis 1, there won't be sufficient room to allow for any other expansions. You'd have to go through and reorganize several streets in San Luis Rio, Colorado. The expectancy there is that you're not going to reroute all that traffic right off the highway. However that would work, it'd be very difficult. So the other recommendation then becomes San Luis 2 port of entry discussed as being used for private vehicles and allowing more crossing lanes there. And then the last 2 items deal with staffing. The primary efficiencies that we've been talking about related to staffing is get sufficient staff so that it could be utilized correctly. And then the other aspect of that is we need the entomologist on site in San Luis to ensure that we don't have to share with Calexico, delaying any loads that we'd be coming across. These would be ag loads that sometimes get delayed 4 or 5 days if the entomologist isn't able to inspect the loads, and sometimes those spoil right there awaiting inspection. So we figured those are the key elements, is to get both ports of entry staffed sufficiently, get the entomologist on board, and then have the infrastructure improvements put in place and put us on par with all the other Arizona state ports. On the next page, we have the Department of Labor. We're asking that Congress would direct the Secretary of Labor to enact these changes to H2A. The good news is that a couple of them were enacted last year from this list, so I was able to eliminate those. Those items were related to be able to post jobs and to be able to recruit workers. But as you can see, some of the main points still remain, so that would be the next request, is to direct the Secretary of Labor to make these changes. In relation to ozone, what we have here is I've gone through and revised the bill that Senator Flake was ready to drop last year. Didn't make it out of committee at the federal level, so I removed all the references to those dates and everything. So, Mr. Chairman, that bill is prepped and ready to go, so whenever we make contact, I can either email that or we can hand a copy to the delegation so that they understand what we're asking for. And the same is going to hold true on the federal tax intercept. We know that this bill was introduced back in 2011, and it moved it out of committee, but it did not pass a vote in Congress. So again, I revised all the dates, got everything prepped and ready, so there's an electronic copy, or we can print out a paper copy of this bill and have it ready to go to hand off to the delegation. Mr. Chair, so the last one is we want to reintroduce and pass this bill in order to allow for that federal intercept.
Paul, thank you very much. That was a very succinct, very direct presentation. That was very good, very good. One last thing.
Yes.
Free trade and the free trade agreement and its impact in Yuma County. Now, we've been contacted by the Mexican consulate, who wants to see if it becomes part of our economic development process to make sure that the information about the new free trade agreement is made available to both the public in Yuma County and officials like us. So there may be sort of a need for sometime in the near future for a presentation or for a, I don't know, a mini conference in regards to what the new free trade. I mean, I was mostly aware of what the what do you call it? What the agreements were in the prior one, because it's been around for a long time. But the new one may have things in there that we need to be aware of. So, you know, I encourage you to get in touch with the consulate and office and find out, or at least get enough information about the free trade agreement to see whether Yuma County, you know, should get involved in supporting that, you know, the signing of that bill. It's too premature for me to say one way or another, but I think it's an issue that is going to come up, just like the H-2A immigration permits, labor permits. I mean, that may be an issue that impacts Yuma County directly in terms of its economic development, because we're working in that four-fronted region. It may be something that we like to get involved in, or at least I'd like to get some information on, and to sort of, you know, put it in the radar screen. Maybe it's not fully developed as an action point or a discussion point, but who knows? There may be something in there that needs our support or our opposition.
And Mr. Chair, thank you for mentioning that. The consul had made a contact through AWC as a request to have that presentation. And then so we forwarded that to the city of Yuma to start the discussion, because they were looking for a topic for their next economic development forum as supported by Forefront ED.
Oh, good.
So their representatives have met with the Mexican consulate, and they're starting to develop. They don't have a date specific yet. I would anticipate something in March or April, but we'll see what they're able to work out in relation to getting that going for a forum.
Well, since we're going to be going to Washington, I felt it may be time for us to start gauging who's in support and who's against it, so that we can sort of, you know, if we need to help or if we need to hinder, you know, we'd be aware where, you know, what to do in terms of its impact in Yuma County and its economic development.
Mr. Chair, then, so am I hearing that you'd like to have something before your trip
at least,
to?
yeah, could you get us some sort of a summary of points as they pertain to Yuma County and the trade that we have between the countries? I'd like to at least get a sense of what's going on. I certainly wouldn't like to talk about supporting it or not if I'm not aware of what's in it.
Okay,
Or we're
will
not
do.
aware of what's in it. Supervisor McLeod, you had something?
No, sir.
Yes?
No, I'm good.
No? No. Okay, fine. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome, Mr. Chair.
And then what we got left is an executive session in a work session. Do we do the work session and get into the executive session, or do we do the executive session? What do you guys, how's your time frame? How long is the presentation from Human Resources? We'll take 5 and, you know, to make a decision, okay? Because we need a break. Just 5 minutes, and you guys decide which one goes first, okay? Oh, sorry. We're going to get back. Oh, my God, the computer went off. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to get back to the meeting, and we are going to go into, after long discussion with legal, they have decided to, let you guys go first, but they've said, make it short. So the work session, hey, they always have legal opinions. They always have opinions. So we have a work session, human resources, discussable and possible direction to staff regarding potential changes to the pay for performance program, including personnel rule 304 and related matters. Staff will give a small, very short PowerPoint presentation.
And Mr. Chairman, before you start, just to remind the public that you still want to do events calendar after this.
That's right, and we are just taking the time to listen to you guys, but we have still things to do after you finish. So we have the events calendar left after the presentation, and we have an executive session schedule, making it even more pertinent that this be a short presentation. Go ahead.
Could you be sure you spend at least 3 minutes on each side? Because I'm slow.
I will remember if you make it any longer
But at
than
least
necessary.
very informative.
So
I don't care
Go
how
ahead.
long it
Good
takes.
morning, my name is Felicia Frausto, Human Resources Director, and you had the PowerPoint presentation that was provided to you prior, so this way we'll be able to cover the main points, and if there's any discussion, be happy to address that for you. Back in June of 2018, you had given clear direction to staff as to please provide, us with some type of development plan for the next year paper performance. So that could potentially apply to FY 2019, 2020. So in today's agenda, we are going to discuss Personnel Rule 304, current pay performance system, which is in your packet, so you can see what our current rule is. The Performance Evaluation Committee, I do have committee members here, so that this way you can also, if you have questions for them, they would be happy to answer them for you. We had an employee survey, so you also have that presented in your packet, both English and Spanish. Committee recommendations, and then your feedback and direction would be very helpful. So part of the current performance evaluation personnel rule 304, we are recommending that it would be updated to reflect from 2007, it shows importance of linking employee performance to the strategic plan. It applies to all employees whose pay is not subject to any other pay plan or agreement. Each agency is responsible for establishing the performance standards for their employees. That's through their objectives and expectations, but funding has not yet readily available to our employees since FY 07-08. And so that lends us to where we're at today. So if we were looking at the paper performance, the committee met. HR established a performance evaluation committee. As you'll see that we had over 33 members, part of that committee from departments and offices to discuss recommendations. We were able to talk about a merit service award, but in accordance to ARS 38615A, that is not something that we would be able to do, because if we were to receive any additional award for our employees, it's not tied to performance. It is something that they were able to provide service of innovation, showing that there is a savings to the county as a whole, not because their performance was stellar. We looked at formatting of the performance evaluation form, making recommendations of streamlining that, and conduct and analyze employee survey on performance evaluation process and the need for training and supervisors. So we developed a performance evaluation survey, which was provided to you both in English and in Spanish. We had, normally you would think that we would send out to the full population, but also the courts are involved, but the courts do not fall under our current paper performance pay plan. So we sent it out to the remaining 728 employees, and we received 158 responses back. And of the questions that we asked is we asked them, could you please tell us, how do you feel about Yuma County's performance evaluation process? Do you feel the performance evaluation process depicts the last 12 months of your service? And you'll see the other questions that we asked. It was quite interesting because at first we didn't have immediate responses. Employees were somewhat reluctant to actually give the responses because they felt like, if I respond, what retaliation might I receive? And so we had representatives from our committee who were able to share with them, no, helps you, and it helps them to feel as if your feedback is going to help us to develop an evaluation process that people feel comfortable in utilizing. So with that, we then started getting all the responses in. It took 3 weeks. We provided that information, but you'll see it was kind of like a mixed bag. So of the 158 responses, you had a third who were in favor, and these are actual responses from the employees. I feel good about the performance evaluation. It's hard to evaluate oneself, but employees like it, the ability to express concerns about all aspects of their job and receive supervisor's opinion and observations. The process is fair, it works, and it continues. Then you had a third that said they weren't in favor, that employees feel it's boring, a waste of time, the process should be done away with, it's superficial and unnecessary, they don't care for it, it's too time consuming. And then you had a third that were neutral. I feel that the process is fair, it covers what's needed, but aside from getting a yearly raise, would like to see a monetary compensation like most organizations. The tool is an important part of employment, but some supervisors may not be using it as the way it's intended, but due to a lack of meaning in terms of pay adjustment. So we were just like, what is it, the direction that our employees want us to also focus on? So at that point, the committee said, okay, we're going to review the results. We identified that the committee themselves were also 50-50. So some of the committee members felt as if, let's do away with the process. Other committee members felt like, no, the process does work, but it's because of the fact that we don't have pay, or we're saying that there's pay tied to it. That's why we haven't really seen that it's beneficial. We looked at practices in other Arizona counties, which you also have listed there for you. And they experienced the same thing as well, but they've been able to look at alterations. Either they're giving merit across the board, or they're doing a cost of living adjustment. It's one or the other. So at that point, the committee said, HR, you bring us recommendations, because if we're split, what do you recommend? So through that process, I did do a comparison, not only with counties, but also with the private sector. Part of the first recommendations is that we should have some type of evaluation process, just remove the pay. You should be meeting with your employees, telling them whether they're doing well, what areas they need improvement on, but does that necessarily mean that it's once a year? There's nothing wrong that there could be something that's established with our employees on a regular basis, regular meaning you might do it once a quarter, you might do it every 6 months. Also, we looked at the employee classification for the attorneys. One thing that we found is that the attorneys fall under their own classification because they are an at-will employee. So how do you evaluate an attorney? Based on the number of cases that they win? Based on the number of cases of what they're not successful in? I mean, it really makes it difficult. So when they fall under our personal rule right now, they are not subject to the county's personal rules, but we're having them be subject to our pay per performance. So we talked about, let's remove them out of there, and they could use some other tool that might be beneficial for them, so that this way they can evaluate their performance. Other options for increases were based on merit or exceeds. Meets or exceeds. Increase to base pay, increase to lump sum, one time only, a combination of base pay increase and lump sum one time only, and I'll give further information to that because it goes with options. Revise and update the evaluation form to reflect knowledge, skills, and ability. So make it very simplistic for the employee. So once the committee heard my recommendations, then we looked at it. They agreed, yep, we should go ahead and remove that pay in our rule changes. Just say to evaluation program, revise and streamline the form. Revise and update the evaluation to reflect the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Look at the employee classification and removing the attorneys from that process. But change the current evaluation due date from August to the employee's anniversary date. And the reason why they stated that, because it eased the burden on the department head who currently evaluates all employees at the same time. For example, the sheriff's office, they have over 300 plus employees. They're tasked to evaluate everybody all at the same time. And they were definitely, their representative was like, this would ease the burden on us, while other large departments as well felt that same type of recommendation. So then we looked at other committee recommendations, identified percentage of pay, which would include in the budget. So here are three options. You could keep your current process with the changes to PR 304, but the evaluation's tied to, not tied to pay differential. So there's not going to be that differential in pay based on, I'm going to have an evaluation, then we can determine exactly what we're going to pay. Then you have option two, create tiers to acknowledge meets and exceeds. So we were looking at different levels. I know that there are times that it's been communicated. You have an employee who might be at the step 1 of our pay grade, and you have another employee who might be at step 12 of that pay grade. And so when they receive a meets, that's a much higher percentage income for them as to someone who's over here at step 1. So we looked at our grades on our pay scale. So the lower grade, step 79, which is right now minimum wage, so it's $11.04 an hour, $11.07 an hour on our pay scale. They would be subject to receiving a meets for 1%. And if they were to receive an exceeds, they could be eligible to receive that 2%. That is up to the grade of 111, a supervisor grade. Then you had level 2, which is a grade 112 supervisors and a manager or above, where we would only be subject to the meets. So that this way you would reduce the amount of compression that could occur, but individuals on the lower side below that midpoint would still be increasing while others over here. So it addresses some of those concerns that many of our board members had asked at one time. And then option 3, that all employees would be eligible for meets, and that meets would be determined by, is it a 1%, 2%, what the board decides to fund. So this is where we would ask for your feedback. So A, scrap the performance evaluation process. This would eliminate the existing method to identify meets or exceeds. Or B, keep the process and make improvements as discussed earlier. 2, identify a percentage each year for a pay for performance to include budget in addition to a cost of living adjustment. Or 3, if number 2 is approved, then preference for distribution of that funding for meets. So this is where A would be base pay increases 1%, the exceeds is 1%, or plus an additional lump sum that could equal that other additional 1%. B, base pay increase for meets and exceeds is 1 or 2. 3, C is base pay increase for all employees that meets only is 1%. The department head is able to identify up to 10% of employees for exceed 1 or 2% lump sum. Or D, what other options that you might have.
Okay.
So, next steps, what would you like for us to look at, implementing some type of process as described, and based on your feedback today for us, what would you like for us to continue with proposing for FY 1920?
Well, that didn't work out as planned.
Oh, no, it's okay. I'm good. I do have a question.
Yeah, a question.
For legal, the whole time I've been on the board, I've been told that we cannot give a lump sum to an employee. Has this been approved? The proposal
You mean, is
to
that
provide a lump
changed?
sum? Or did something change?
We do it, don't we?
No.
We do it for,
No, we don't. We do it like as a reward when somebody wins.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Employee of the
We
Year.
do it.
We're talking about giving multiple employees a lump sum. And my whole time, I've advocated that before, and I've been told we can't.
well,
Unless they do it to everybody, right?
No.
I don't have the answer right here for you. I know one of our deputies did some research and was concerned that you would not be able to under the gift clause.
That's what I've
it's
been
not a
told.
gift though, it's a performance bonus. You can give bonuses, is that what you?
I could come back and send you a memo back on it if you'd like. I don't have an answer right now.
Oh, sure, that's good, it's fine.
See, the thing about a lump sum is it doesn't obligate you going forward.
Well,
I'm told that Shannon and Teresa have been working together on it. He can comment on it if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
Hi, Shannon.
Other agencies too.
Yeah, but the
IRS,
state, the county is really regulated.
The things that we discussed, in fact, I discussed this matter with Teresa Fox. You're correct, you can't give a lump sum, you can't tie that lump sum to pay. What we had talked about previously was to expand the Employee of the Year program, because the employee who has that reward, they actually have to exceed based on the statute. But we can't tie that reward to performance or pay. So it has to be separate.
Wait,
So what you could do, right now what we do is, there's a limit put on by the statute of, I think, $2,500 that you can pay an employee as an employee of the year. It's an incentive, basically, program. To reward, based on the statute, is very narrow, what the employee is being rewarded for. It can't just be their normal duties that they're performing. That's then pay, and that's not allowed by the statute. However, there's no limit put, per the statute, on the amount of awards that you can award. There's just a limit on the individual award. So you could increase that or expand that program to reward employees who, per the statute, exceed their normal job duties. So instead of maybe having one award of $2,500, you could have 10. And then those who are put in as part of the analysis process by the committee that's picked by the board to decide who wins those, you could have, instead of one employee, you could have 10 or 15. But it can't be tied to compensation.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does.
And it can
Weird
be,
sort of way.
and Shannon, it can be less than 2,500.
It could be less as well. You could have, 10 awards of $1,000 per award. And again, when it comes to exceeds, it's sometimes we just think, well, instead of one widget, they did 10 widgets, But the statute is very particular about what exceeds means, or what the award would mean. And it would have to fall within those parameters per the statute.
It would be somebody out at Public Works who comes up with an idea that saves the vehicles having to be serviced every 6 weeks and
If it's
makes
not
it.
part of their job duties, it would have to be something above and beyond. And it could involve
That's
also,
right.
I think the statute, I don't want to speak out of turn, but also there's some type of community work involved. You could show that you're exceeding by a public service, some type of public service. Or you bring in a money-saving idea to the county that's beyond, what your normal day-to-day functions are. A clerk who answers phones and, greets customers could come up with an idea to save money, maybe in the way they do permitting or something like that. That's unrelated to their job, but really promotes a county purpose or a county function.
But all that would do is it would widen the reward system. It's not really a pay for performance type situation.
It cannot be tied to.
It's not a bonus.
No. And one of the things that we as a committee had talked about was the idea of exceed. So if a person exceeds 1 year and their pay is affected, let's say they're making 2% more based on that 1 year analysis. Next year, if they don't exceed, you're still giving them the pay for exceeding that 1 year. This way, you're expanding a program that acknowledges what they did during that year per the statute and saying, we're giving you this amount of money.
Well, we could do this on a monthly basis, for example, or as opposed to one time a year, and it could be by department, it could be something like that.
Again, you want to pass it through the county attorney, but I don't know that the statute speaks about how often you can. It's just the amount of the award and how the award is awarded. What's the parameters or the qualifications for that award?
Mr. Chairman, if you think about it, the pay for performance is prospective based upon prior performance. So you're not rewarding somebody necessarily for something they did in the past, as opposed to that reward will be established in the new salary for the new year, either to the hourly.
Which is a one-time situation.
But you would still get the 1 or 2% pay hike for all employees.
Yeah, you would get everything the same as everybody else.
This is just an extra for those.
I think the concern with the bonus is you've already salaried an employee to perform a function, and you expect them to do it well. We all do, and then.
But he did something extraordinary.
If they do something extraordinary, and this was an issue we were looking at the past merit program, was some of it related to the things they were already doing and were paid to do. You don't reward them for that. You reward them for things that exceed outside their scope of their normal duties and functions. So statute allows you to give a small bonus, for lack of a better word. It's like a merit award. And if it allows you to do it, then you can do it. But nowhere else in the statute does it allow you to do it simply for performance that exceeds what that supervisor expectations were for that last year.
You know how we've been doing this thing for safety? Why couldn't we do the same thing for performance? You know, where they come to the board meeting, somebody from a department and the department head says
Mr.
something, and then it goes in their evaluation form.
Mr.
or
Chairman?
their portfolio.
You could if the statute allows you to do it. The safety award, I remember we discovered this was allowed by statute, and that's why we started it. But if it doesn't allow that to happen, then you don't have the authority to do it. The only ones I can think of off the top of my head is the safety award and the merit award. It's how you do it is maybe a little flexible for each county.
I'm trying to say that there's no money involved.
What?
A lot of times employees like to be, should be recognized
We're doing that.
for doing a very good job.
You can do that.
Oh, yeah.
As long as you're not
Are
doing
you
that
already doing that?
Yeah, it's okay.
Well, we did the
I mean-
Safety Excellence Award, but we
But
also had
that's-
the Employee of the Year.
Yes,
But-
the Employee
so
of
it
the
sounds like
Year.
you're talking about maybe doing quarterly merit
Yes.
award program like the Safety Award.
Yes.
Yeah, you could do that.
But with no money involved, but recognizing their.
When I have money.
I think we're getting off,
We
I
can't.
think
Mr. Chairman.
we're
We
getting
can't
off
do
the
money.
subject here.
If
I
I
mean,
may.
because, wait, guys. You know, I think that we need to go back and focus on what the meeting was supposed to be, which was an analysis of whether a pay-for-performance system could be implemented. And, you know, the results are that most of the employees really don't care for that. I mean, you know, third were neutral, third were in opposition, they thought it took too long and it was just whatever. So we're getting down now to discussing a sort of a reward program right now, not really a performance, pay for performance. We're getting down to how can we acknowledge some people who go beyond what they do in a monetary way. And remember, we already have benefit programs that give people money to go to school. We pay some of the, you know, student loans. We have a bunch of programs that really are designed to, you know, to reward those who want to do or want to go beyond, or we have a tough time, you know, recruiting. We've done that with the sheriff department. We've made some changes. I think we're flexible enough, and I'm not sure that what the initial trust for this was, look, how can we find a way to reward people who perform better through their pay? That was, to me, why we did all these things. And it turns out that, you know, we can sort of do that, but not in a bonus, you know, or not in a pay scale type of thing, that we can keep our system of different levels of steps. But if we want to reward people who exceed in some extraordinary way, that we need to find a different way to do that. And I think we can do that. We can come back with, you guys can come back with some sort of reward program that is approved by the attorneys that can work. We don't have to get into all the details of that. I think that the problem for me was we didn't have any money anyway in the past. We didn't, you know, we talked about rewarding people. We didn't put money in the budget to go beyond the 1 or 2 or 3% increase. So I think the decision that the board needs to make is, can we set aside a certain amount of money? Can we set up a reward program that, you know, that is extraordinary in nature, that isn't just, you know, tied into their performance at the job they already do? Something that isn't permanent, so that we don't reward somebody for being really good one year and really sucky the next year, type of thing. You know, so that's what you're entrusted with. You know, for us to go into details about which program and what program, I think that all we need to do is it legal? Can we do it more often? And can we put aside money for it? Right? Those are the three, you know, main questions that I would have. Can we do it? Can we set aside money for it? And is it legal?
Sure.
Yes.
I have a different approach.
I'm surprised.
I knew you would. The recommendations from Human Resources, I think there are some good ones. Number one, revising and updating the evaluation form to reflect knowledge, skills, and abilities is a great improvement. I also think it was very clever to change the evaluation date to the employee's annual
I like that.
That was good.
you know, anniversary. That way the time can be taken and the supervisor doesn't feel under this tremendous pressure to all of a sudden, I got to get all these things done. And so I don't think that lends itself to creative evaluation and probably even appropriate evaluation when there's such a time crunch. So I think that was a great recommendation. I have been banging this drum, as some of you know, for a very long time on pay for performance. I do like the lump sum, but I think we're constricted by statute. So I would be very much in favor of the option C, which all employees, when we have the money, and again, I understand this is based on the board providing the budget to do so. It might be 0.5% for meets and 1% for exceeds.
That's on the direction
in a
that was.
particular year. But the formula is the same. I don't know that you would want to put a percentage, but you would say able to identify up to 10% of employees for an additional whatever the number is that the board provided for that year. I don't think I would put the 1% or 2% because we may not be able to afford it, or we may have 2 years we can't give raises, and all of a sudden, you know, the economy's flush or a huge project comes in and we have the money to give raises. That may be 2% for meets and up to 4% for exceeds. But this has been forever coming for me. I really strongly believe that we should reward employees who manage to, or who do better, instead of giving an excellent employee the same raise as the person next to them who managed not to get fired that year. I've never thought that that was fair, and that's not the way it works in the private world. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know, this is just a work session. I don't think we're taking motions, but
we just give direction.
If we were, that would be my motion, that we, you know, we change the way that you're evaluating, improve it, do it on an annual basis upon the employee's anniversary, and choose option 3C. And we finally can reward employees who do well. And I am in favor of the maximum of 10% because some supervisors may want to give everybody the raise. They don't want to do that, but I think a good supervisor will be able to pick and select up to 10% of their employees who do deserve more than the person who sat next to them and managed not to get fired.
That is, of course, so hold on a minute. That is, of course, if we get beyond the point where, you know, supervisors are, you know, choosing the people they like.
There you go.
And then, you know, you get into a situation where instead of helping morale, you're hurting it, which is.
Yes, I left that point out.
Yeah.
I think that there should be an
objective.
evaluation process by HR for those who are recommended.
Objective.
Yeah, you should be able to evaluate that. That way, somebody's buddy doesn't get an extra every year.
And that is the only drawback to a system like that, is that it becomes an objective situation where the supervisor can, and normally will, reward people he likes over people who don't like, regardless sometimes of whether the performance is better or not. And I've had that happen many, many times before. So let's proceed under the assumption that we want to make a couple of, you know, changes in there and see how they look when you bring them back. You know, work them through the system, get it, you know, get the departments, you know, to see how they feel about it, and you know, maybe start bringing them back to us one at a time so we can discuss it. I think that there's some easy ones. I'd say that the evaluation not being done all at one time is an easy one. And, you know, some of those are going to be easy to do, I think. That one, or whether there's a reward program, you know, a separate reward program, I think they're going to probably need more discussion. But you know, this is all done so we can improve the system, hopefully improve the system and incorporate some performance metrics into it. So I think that we're going towards where we want to go. We just want to make sure we don't, you know, have the pitfalls that normally happen while you're trying. You know, the old road to hell is paved with good intentions one. It always, you know, come back and bite you. As long as it's clear by legal and you can present it for us for a decision, we'd be more than glad to take it up. Right, guys? All right. Thank you. Step back from the podium. Quickly.
Oh,
you see, I told you.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Worley was just like.
Mr. Worley, we have to say something? Or is that just your thoughtful presence going like this? All right, all right. Okay. No, really, if you want to say something, this is it.
Feel free to lose my phone number.
Feel free to, you know, step into it. That it? Thank you very much. It was not as enlightening as I thought, but thank you very much.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
I'll
Lynn,
talk
you
up.
want to say something?
No, that's okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for all your work on it, too.
Yeah, that, I don't want to minimize your work on it, but.
That's a big group.
No big deal. Yeah, you don't say that, though. All right, so do you want us to go upstairs, or do you want us to leave that for the end? Can we take the events calendar first?
And the county attorney said he's happy to stay right here for the
All right,
executive
so
session.
we're gonna have to throw out the newspaper. No, we have the events calendar first. I'm just kidding you, Blake.
We have
All
the
right.
events calendar first.
Okay, let's do the events calendar. Lynn, would you please go first?
Yes. I was on a panel for Project Central, which is a leadership program that goes around the state. And I was on a water panel with 3 of the experts in the water in Yuma County, and felt very honored to be asked to do that. I attended the CSA legislative policy meeting via the telephone and voted the way I thought you would want to be voted.
Thank you.
And then I went out to Sela for the fairgrounds, out at the fairgrounds to Sela to watch the kids show their lambs, my grandson mainly. I attended RTAC, drove up to Phoenix with Paul Ward and Maria Ramos, and attended the luncheon for legislators for our rural transportation committee. I went to Arizona Haves, Water Haves and Have-Nots, put on by the director of the Kyle Center. I am finished with grand jury. Whoop, 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 whoop. They can't call me back for 2 years, so we'll see what happens in 2 years.
They're gonna make an exception for you.
I know, they probably will, yes. Anyway, I was able to make part of my YMPO meeting after a grand jury. I attended my Hospice of Yuma board meeting, and I went to the Yuma area prayer breakfast and attended Redondo Days dinner. So.
All right. Okay, Supervisor McLeod.
Thank you. I attended the Water Resources Research Center. It's a U of A sponsored the annual conference. Very interesting, even though the drought contingency plan has been passed and signed by the governor, Bureau of Reclamation will be opening the comment period. That is nothing like what most people thought. It's like, okay, we're done. No, that was just a simple first step. Nothing is done.
Wow.
So the Bureau of Reclamation will be making decisions on the state's behalf. So our neighbor is kind of gumming up the works, Imperial Valley. They are the only ones who've not signed off. And so that's not helping. So hopefully they will sign off on a plan and we can move this thing forward, but it's by no means a done deal. Attended the County Supervisors Association Legislative Policy Committee meeting, chaired that meeting. Also attended the Arizona Association of Counties Legislative Policy Committee. Also attended the ACO board meeting, the CSA board meeting, the CSA legislative reception, and it was pretty well attended. Unfortunately, the drought contingency plan, there were meetings being held at that time, and so it reduced the number of legislators that were able to attend, particularly some of our new ones, but there's not much you can do about that. It was well attended, and they do a great job putting that on. Also attended the County Supervisors Association Presidents and Executives meetings in Washington, D.C. I've met with various legislators on some of our policy issues, and I got a call Saturday morning from Craig Sullivan of CSA, and I do have to go up to the Capitol and testify on Thursday on behalf of CSA regarding the EORP, the Elected Officials Retirement Plan. And then, of course, I'll stay over to chair the LPC meeting. So it'll be a.
So
another
it didn't
busy
work.
week.
I ordered the polar vortex when you were in Washington. It did not work. You
No,
were
it was
able to
like-
get back.
I was able to get back.
No, there's one comment I'd like to make, just because of how much trouble you're doing right now. I've always found it disturbing that, you know, that the individual board member that decides to use their car gets punished for doing that. You know, instead of, you know, getting the normal mileage reimbursement, you get like 20%, 25 cents or something like that, which I think it's something. All right, well, I don't know if that signally means that somebody's looking at it right now, but I find that disturbing. Instead of, you know, being rewarded for using your own vehicle, you're being punished for doing that. And I just don't, you know, direction is given to staff to look into the matter.
Well, I appreciate
Supervisor,
that. Thank you.
no, you haven't seen your travel request. I mean, it's just weird.
Fairly quiet. Attended the annual prayer breakfast. Thanks Russ for the ticket. He wasn't able to make that. It was very good. PSPRS meeting over at the sheriff's office for some people they've got coming up on retirement. And was the guest speaker at the detention officer's graduation at the sheriff's office.
Supervisor Porcher?
Yes, I attended the YMPO meeting. I also attended ribbon cutting for the Sunset Health Community Health Center at the north end of Yuma there on Avenue B, which is a great facility, great clinic that'll benefit all that area and more. And not only that area, but it's a real nice building.
Big.
And it is big, yes. And I also had a meeting last week with the chairman with the Mexican Council.
All right. Beyond the meeting, beyond attending that Sunset Community Clinic, and you know, it really is significant in the sense that it expands that safety net, health safety net that we have in the county, because a lot of people feel more comfortable attending, especially going to some of those clinics as opposed to the hospital, which is by now anytime you have any health issue, you know, you have to make an appointment, and it'll take, you know, 2 weeks for them to give you an aspirin or something. You know, it's real nice addition. We did have I telephonically met with the council and discussed some of the issues that were brought up earlier. And unless there's something particularly special about about the March 11th meeting, I'd like to cancel that meeting and really actually have it the 18th. It's a week later. I don't understand what, you know, we're going to be in Washington basically attending, you know, supervisors' issues, I mean, all week prior to that. So unless there's somebody here that really likes to meet two weeks in a row, I would say that we dispose with the March 11th meeting, unless there's something in there that really needs to be done, okay?
Yes, what we could do is check and see if any planning and zoning items are already scheduled
That's
for
right.
that
No.
meeting, and if not, then we can cancel that meeting.
All right, well, we got time, even if that is the case, to republish the date. Okay.
Well, I don't want to do that, but.
Well, yes, I do. I thought you said the chairman could do this. Just kidding. All right, then why don't we just go into the executive session? Is there any, oh, sorry, John, I'm sorry.
Didn't you
got
want me to
anything
let me
report?
say anything about it?
No, I didn't want you to say anything. Listen, we can do this, we can deal with it.
Time's up.
That's it.
At a previous managers meeting, and I've been following up with a little survey, I am finding out what policies other counties use for travel reimbursement for people who use their personal vehicle. So I'll be getting that information out to you soon. And we may have some recommended changes. I need to talk with our chief financial officer as well. I attended my Arizona City County Management Association conference, which was very enlightening, educational, and it's always good to meet with your colleagues from around the state to find out what they're up to. And then last Saturday evening, I attended the rodeo sponsors dinner, and then the rodeo parade is this coming Saturday morning. I'm not sure if the board is planning to be in the parade or not, but to let the public know, there'll be a parade downtown.
Oh, well.
That's all I've got.
All I want to emphasize is that we always end up in the back of the parade for some reason. I think it's because of the posting, you know, the horses that accompany us all the time. But being in a boat, we should be able to be a little more up front. You know, we have to get there. We get there at 9 and actually start in the parade by 10:30 or something like that. It's really weird how, you know, they set it aside. So somebody can make
I know the Welton and the Foothills, they put you up towards the front.
Yeah, well, I think they do it because they think the sheriff department in general is going to be accompanied by horses, and they don't want people to step on the hambawa, that the horses leave in the road, so they put you on the back. But we don't, we're in a boat. We're not disposing of anything that, could be harmful. So please tell them, hey, we don't have to wait till the end. All right, anything else, Susan? No? Then we're gonna respectfully ask the newspaper reporter to leave before we call for executive. No, you can wait until the end of the meeting, and we can call you back in if you need to wait or something. So, all right, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Chairman,
much.
I think you can have a motion to adjourn your regular session, move into executive session, and then following the executive session, it would just
Right,
be the
all right.
end.
This time I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn because I normally don't ask for a motion to adjourn, but this time because we're coming back, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn and go into an executive session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn and go into executive session, so we're gonna be meeting an executive